Attention senators, the legislature is scheduled to reconvene in 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to George W. Norris Legislative Chamber. The afternoon session is about to reconvene. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
I have a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Do you have any items for the record?
Mr. President, I have just one item. Senator Clements offers LR 100. That will be laid over.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Coltman, for what purpose do you rise?
Point of personal privilege,
Please
please.
proceed.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I've not yet spoken today, and I thought it would just be appropriate that I address the body on some important information that we've undercovered this morning. As you all know, Senator Scheer and I are known to be mistaken for one another on occasion, and I guess that's to be expected. But now we have someone new who's a little taller, a little wider. But Senator Wayne, other than that, you're now my new brother from another mother. And all you have to do is read unicameral update, and you can see that. Thank you very much. Welcome to the family.
Thanks, Senator Coltman. Speaker Scheer, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, because some of you have not been part of a veto override, I wanted to sort of preview what the rules will be in relationship to our discussion this afternoon. This is a yes/no question. Motions, amendments will be out of order. We cannot amend it, we cannot bracket it, you cannot do anything other than discuss the bill. It is a normal discussion. Each person will have 3 times at the mic. You do have the ability to provide your time to somebody else if you so wish. And at whatever point in time the queue is cleared, or if we are becoming redundant and somebody determines they want to call the question, that's up to the chair. Normally that has not happened. We usually get our time in and people have made whatever discussion they want to make, and we will simply vote on it. It is either a yes or a no question, but it will run exactly like any other floor debate. So you will punch your light on, you will be able to discuss things. You have 3 times at the mic if you choose to use that. And when everyone is done talking, then we will take a vote. So it's not the one time up and you can't wave. It is different than that. It is a normal discussion, 3 times at the mic. You can provide your time to somebody else if you so wish. And we will move forward at the point in time that everyone has had their say. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll move to the 1:30 agenda item. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Dorn would move that Legislative Bill 472 become law, notwithstanding the objections of the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Dorn, you're recognized to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lieutenant Governor, welcome colleagues. I come today with a motion to override the governor's veto of LB 472. LB 472 passed on final reading with a vote of 43 ayes and 6 nays. This legislative body is aware of what has happened with Gage County and the Beatrice 6. The legal process is over. The courts have decided. The federal judgment is final. Gage County owes a judgment of $28.1 million, attorney fees of about $2 million, and about an additional $1 million in interest. This brings the total owed and due to approximately $31 million. Today, under state statutes that this legislative body has put in place, Gage County will pay 100% of this judgment with property taxes. In their current fiscal year, Gage County has raised property taxes to the maximum 50-cent levy limit. This first year paying the judgment, the levy of 11.76 cents dedicated to that judgment will be used to raise approximately $3.8 million. At that rate, it will take just a little bit over 8 years to pay off the $31 million judgment. This payment using property taxes and future payments using property taxes will be decided on and voted on solely by the county board. not by a vote of the people. In the governor's veto letter, he stated, and I quote, "Traditionally, the legislature has not authorized political subdivisions to impose new taxes on Nebraskans without a vote of the people." I remind you, 100% of this federal judgment of $31 million will be paid by new property taxes, a property tax increase that was not voted on by the people. Many of you have been contacted by the governor in the last several days asking you to vote down this bill. One of his suggestions is similar to another bill I brought, which was LB 473, the bill that would allow the state to lend the money to a county for a federal judgment at 0.5% interest. Currently, the state can for a state judgment, but not a federal judgment. I visited with Nebraska State Treasurer John Moranti several weeks ago about LB 473. We visited about how a loan would be handled in the state's budget and fiscal accounting. Treasurer Moranti said it would need to be accounted for and that it would come out of the state's so-called rainy day fund. At that time, the state was looking at a rainy day fund balance of about $259 million. I also visited 3 or 4 times with Tom Berquist, our chief fiscal director, about this, and he said the same thing. It would need to be a line item out of the rainy day fund. I then visited with Appropriation Chairman Senator Stinner about a loan, and he also, after visiting with some other people, he contacted some other people, said it would need to come out of the rainy day fund. I then had the discussion with Senator Stinner about the possibility of that passing, and him and I both came to the same conclusion that this year, with that rainy day fund looking the way it was looking for those numbers, that there was a very, very small chance of having a loan pass. The other side to that also is, if you would pass a loan, that still requires or only allows that loan to be paid off 100% with property taxes. Gage County currently, if they would get the loan, would pay the state 0.5% in that bill. Gage County currently, the interest rate was set on the federal judgment by the court in 2016 at 0.4512 of 1%, or less than 0.5%. So Gage County, the interest rate on the loan would be about the same. Also, the loan would only be allowed to be paid off by property taxes. This bill, LB 472, would allow a county with a federal judgment of at least $25 million to collect a 1/2 cent county-wide sales tax to help pay the judgment. This sales tax could only be collected if the county is at its maximum levy authority of 50 cents. In other words, the county cannot use part of this sales tax to supplement each year those property taxes. If they go any less than 50 cents of levy, the county cannot collect this sales tax. This bill would sunset in 2017 or whenever the judgment is paid off, whichever comes first. This sales tax would need to be approved by at least 5 members of the board of 7, not by a 2/3 supermajority vote. And this sales tax would collect approximately $1.25 million per year. Using the sales tax with the property taxes, then it would take the length of this paying the judgment off from right now approximately 8+ years down to somewhere between 6 and 6.5 years. LB 472 will give some property tax relief, and it will help pay off the $31 million judgment. I ask for a green vote in overriding the governor's veto.
Thanks, Senator Dorn. Debate will now commence. Senator Chambers.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, I enthusiastically support what Senator Dorn is doing, and it made me think of something. If I said this, it wouldn't catch your attention other than the fact that I'm calling your attention to it. Listen, my children, while I pause to tell you the story of William Dawes. You'd say, who is William Dawes? But on the other hand, if I were to say, listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. It was the 18th of April, 75. Hardly a man is now alive, I'm one of them, who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friends, if the British march by land or by sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the old church tower as a signal light, one if by land, two if by sea. I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm to every Middlesex village and farm for the countrymen to be up and to arm. That's what we need to do today. This governor has been given the back of his hand to this legislature even before we took session. Now, Senator Dorn pointed out how the governor said something was not traditional in terms of what the legislature may allow. We allowed it. We took a vote. We, the legislature, voted to do what Senator Dorn is asking. We don't have to be bound by what was not done in the past. I would tell the governor this. Traditionally, no governor has spent more than $500,000 to overturn a legislative enactment over his veto, but he did it. He will do anything he wants to do. He will tell these senators where you can go and tell others, this is where you had better go and this is what you had better do. I'm probably more outraged and indignant than Senator Dorn because I've been here over 4 decades and I've watched various governors bully this legislature. Now, it is insulting to all of us, whether you voted for what Senator Dorn wanted the first time or not, for the governor to presume that he can take a dozen votes off that vote that we gave. It takes 30 votes to override a veto. How many of you are going to be backed off by the governor? That vote will be on the board, and it will tell us, maybe not you, it'll tell me what each one of you is. There should not be any reason to not vote the way that we did before. In fact, because we voted a certain way already, that should be additional incentive for us to stick by what we did. Nobody was drunk in here that day. Nobody was under hypnosis. Nobody was confused, except maybe one of our friends who sits in the front row in the middle of the group. That person may have been confused, but the rest of us knew good and well what we were doing. All of us are adults. Now, if you want some ridicule, you back off what we did before. That is a matter of record. I'd like to ask Senator Dorn a question.
Senator Dorn, yield, please.
Senator Dorn, have you and I ever socialized before?
Not outside of this chamber, no.
Had you ever talked to me personally before you came down here?
No, I have not.
Is there any reason for you to think that the only reason I'm doing this is because you and I are personal friends?
No.
Right. Right. Look, many years, thank you, Senator Dorn. Senator Erdman touched on one thing that would indicate it. I care about the legislature as an institution.
1 minute.
I don't just say it, I have done things. You got that pink slip today. Some of you from far, far away from this legislature, and that money that you get now, that I had to work hard and overcome a governor's veto, then force the state to bring an action in court, so that some of you can come from hundreds of miles away to oppose everything that I do. Different points of view are necessary. There are different entities, different interests, and all of those interests need to be represented here. And if there are people who, but for that money, couldn't afford to be here, it would be the states and the legislature's laws. If we never do it again, for once,
That's
I
time,
hope
Senator.
this flock of sheep will
That's time,
behave
Senator
like a
Chambers.
pride of
Senator
lions.
Chambers, it's time.
Listen to me roar.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Lowe.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Once again, I stand in opposition to 472. This is not the right way to do it. I have empathy for the people of Gage County, the taxpayers of Gage County. I have empathy for Senator Dorn, and I pride him on bringing this bill to help solve the problem. But this is not the right way to do it. It needs to be taken to a vote of the people. It should not be in the hands of 5 councilmen. And that's what it would be. We take it away from the vote of the people and we give it to a body of 5, a body of 7, but they only need 3/4 to pass it. Our system is at stake here. Senator Chambers, you stated that this is a special thing, a special bill. It has limits. You, sir, should know that when we pass legislation for one certain thing, it's not a good thing. And that's what we would be doing. Maybe. Because we could come up with another time like this. A federal judgment could be levied on a county, and then we have to pay, or a county or a city, and then we have to pay, and we'd have to come up with a new sales tax, a new tax, one more, not by the vote of the people, but by just a simple majority of 3/4. That's not the way our system works. We need to come up with 21 people to vote this down. This is new. It has come back to us. The system is working as it should. This is the way it is. You send a bill off once it is passed here to the governor, and he either signs it or he can veto it. That's the way it's always been. This is nothing new. This is nothing new with our governor now. This is the way it works in the federal government. The president can also do the same thing. And then it goes back to the houses. So let's not let this one pass. Let's find another solution for Gage County, one that will work. I have faith in the people of Gage County that they will vote in favor of this, and it needs to go for a vote of the people. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
Thanks, Senator Lowe. Senator Moser.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you, Mr. President. Well, this kind of puts us in a kind of a somber mood this afternoon when we consider the forces that we have to consider. I don't have the sense of glee that Senator Chambers has with considering a veto override. You know, I don't have any particular issue with the governor, even though we don't see eye to eye on everything. But I think we have to look at this not so much as who's for it, who's against it, but more at the issues at hand. And if we were in that situation, if it was my county that had this problem, would I want to do something to try to help? I'm not happy with the judgment. I think $31 million is a lot of money. And the people who are probably the most at fault at this aren't around to be brought to pay for it. So it falls on the pocketbook of the citizens of Gage County. And this bill enables Gage County, their board, to consider a sales tax. The citizens can still go to the county board and tell them whether or not they are in favor of that, so they still have a chance to address their concerns if that's how they'd rather pay for it. But this just gives them the option of using sales tax to pay for part of it. You know, it's a messy situation. Even if this passes, I'm not going to be gleeful, but I just think it's the right thing to do. If it happened to me, to my county, or to any county in my district, I'd want some help. And I think it shows a lot of determination and effort on the behalf of Senator Dorn to bring this bill and to fight for this. I don't think every freshman senator has this kind of animus for a bill, and I admire him for bringing it and for standing up for what he believes. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Mosier. Senator Linehan announces some guests today. We have with us 36 fourth graders from the Blue Sage Elementary School in Elkhorn, Nebraska. They're all with us in the north balcony. Blue Sage fourth graders, please stand up. We can recognize you and welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing discussion, Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise in support of Senator Dorn's motion to override here. And I don't do this lightly. But I'm really disappointed that we're even here discussing this today. We have a property tax crisis in this state because of our unreasonable reliance on property taxes to fund local government, fund public education in this state. And this crisis has been exacerbated in Gage County because of this judgment. Here, Senator Dorn found a way to provide some relief to the beleaguered taxpayers of Gage County. He found a solution that can help spread the cost of repaying this. And this body adopted his solution by a substantial margin, and now it's back in our laps. But this does serve to remind us of a recurring issue discussed by this body, and that is our over-reliance on property taxes to fund local government, to fund public education. And I keep going back to the farmer that testified on this bill. This farmer talked about how his property taxes are going to go up, are going up to a point that he's going to be paying roughly 37 times more than a typical individual non-farmer in his county. He doesn't think that's fair, neither do I. And unfortunately, he's one of a group that would most likely get outvoted in a public election on this issue. Responsible tax policy should be fair, should be balanced, it should be sustainable. And I would suggest the fairest, most responsible, most sustainable means of repaying this is to expand the tax base to include a 1/2 cent sales tax on all taxable sales as proposed in Senator Dorn's bill. This spreads the burden of paying for this. It will be perceived as a more fair, more balanced way of addressing this, and it's more sustainable than calling upon ag producers already struggling from red ink and onerous property taxes to bail out Gage County. It's more sustainable than calling upon a small subset of the residents to foot this bill. And remember, we are talking about a very limited set of circumstances. We're talking about a federal judgment imposed by a federal court in excess of $25 million, and it has to be approved by a 2/3 vote of the local board. This is one way we can deliver property tax relief to some fellow Nebraskans, and I will vote for the override. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Breezy. Senator Ridman.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Good afternoon. Senator Moser's right. It's kind of a somber attitude in here, and I think it should be. I have shared with Senator Dorn what I'm going to do on this bill. And I'm going to give you the reason why I'm going to vote like I'm going to. I voted for 472 3 times. And I believe it was the right thing to do. And then in appropriations, we had an opportunity to make a contribution of $51 million to the property tax credit program, which would have lowered property tax to those people in Gage County. Maybe it was insignificant, but it was a lowering of the property tax. Senator Dorn voted to remove $25 million from the property tax credit program. So as I shared with Senator Dorn, you can't have it both ways. You raise sales tax to lower property tax, and then you vote to remove $25 million from the property tax credit program to raise property tax. You can't have it both ways. One way or the other, but you can't be on both sides of the same issue. So therefore, I will be voting no. I will be voting to sustain the governor's veto on this for that reason. I understand property tax is a big issue. It's the #1 issue. But I also understand we need to learn how to vote correctly to lower property tax and not do it one way one day and another way the next. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Urban. Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the legislature. As I state, my 3 L's are the least, the last, and the lost. I'd like to, before I start, ask Senator Lowe a question or two.
Senator Lowe, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Senator Lowe, sometimes my dreams are so vivid that when a certain amount of time passes, I'm not 100% sure whether I dreamed something or read it. So if this is something I dreamed, I stand to be corrected. Did you offer a bill to allow a tax break of $100 for gun owners who get training in the use of that gun?
Yes, I did.
Isn't that giving special consideration to a certain small group of people?
Yes, it is.
Thanks, and I think that's all I think I made my point. For gun souls, gun lovers, a tax break. They don't need that $100. That is what is a slap in the face of everybody in this state. Senator Dorn is doing what you don't see many politicians do. He's putting his head on the political chopping block because if the people in his county don't like what he did, he won't be back here next time. If he comes back, it means they like it. As was pointed out, the people in that county can show how they feel when time comes for this to be considered by their county board. If they can bring enough pressure to bear, those county officials will not vote to levy that tax. We're not levying the tax with this vote. We're putting it in the hands of the people who were elected to represent that county. And if those people who are to be represented by these individuals on that board provide enough heat, then we will see what the outcome is. But for my part, I see what Senator Erdman's talking about. But I think he was offering legislation and changes to alter the way property is assessed if it's damaged by a flood, a fire, or a natural disaster, and that's for everybody from now on. Why should we allow something like that to be done just because those people's homes happen to get burned up or flooded out? We're considering that legislation right now, and if you don't know what it is, it's LB 512. So he wants it both ways also. The difference between me and most people here, I will acknowledge what it is that I'm doing. I said in the first place, this is an extraordinary circumstance, and extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures. Courts even recognize that. They take into consideration all of the surrounding circumstances in an issue presented to the court for decision. That's why in some cases, they will say, we handled this particular matter on a case-by-case basis. This decision applies to this set of circumstances. It is not a general statement of the law that applies always a case-by-case basis. This legislature has the nimbleness built into the very process itself, whether we use it or not.
1 minute.
To be able to go in one direction and turn on a dime and go in another direction if circumstances warrant that. That's what a legislature is supposed to do. That is the way we're supposed to behave. I was pleased with what the legislature did when it gave that vote. Now, if I was vindictive, I'd say stick it to the ruralies. Don't give them anything. In that county, they voted to overturn the abolition of the death penalty. I want to fix them. And I'd be leading the charge to uphold the veto. But see, unlike some people, I cannot look at the individuals who are in a bad situation and say, because I have a gripe with something they did, I'm going to withhold from them the justice, the attempt to get justice that the legislature is able to provide. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Quick announces a guest visiting today. We have with us Ms. Lisa Albers of the Grand Island Public School System's Board of Education. Ms. Albers is with us on the north balcony. Ms. Albers, if you could please rise, we could welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing discussion, Senator Wayne.
Were you speaking to me or Senator Coulterman? Just trying to clarify this as we keep moving forward here. Sorry, my legal counsel just wrote some notes down for me to speak to. Hi, my name is Senator Coulterman. Nope, wrong part. I'm just doing this to light the mood a little bit. The reason I want to light the mood is because my freshman year, I had the veto override before us regarding felon voting rights. And at one point during this body, through 3 rounds of debate, 36 different individuals voted for my bill. And on the override, it fell to 25. So 1, I know how important a veto override is to Mitty. And for 2, I'm offering support to Dorn because I know that feeling. And not anybody else has really had that feeling yet, and hopefully it won't come to that too many times. But I know that feeling of standing up for something for your community and something for what you believe in. And in this case, Senator Dorn's district needs a solution to save money and to save property taxes. And they've identified multiple ways, and Senator Dorn has spent time trying to figure out those different ways, but none of them are really compatible to the 2 objectives of saving property taxes or lowering property taxes over a period of time and paying off this debt that was through no fault of necessarily the people in that county. I think it's important, and I stood on this floor asking for support for things in my community, that we genuinely step back and say there's policy across the state, but is there a way to make sure we can help out each other's communities? And this is a way to do that. Senator Dorn has re-examined other solutions, and it is clear from me talking to him, this is the only way. When someone comes to this body with a crisis in their district, I think it's our duty and obligations to listen and hear that crisis. At least try to understand. At least have a conversation. And so I hope before you just vote no, that you spent time talking to him about the due diligence he did to get to this point. Because when you hear that due diligence, you'll see that this is what's right for his district. And if something like this came along in another fashion, maybe it's a flood, maybe it's something else, that you have to come to this body and say, we need help, that we take those time to listen and figure out how to make it the best we can. And I think we did with this bill. And with that, I offer my support, and I'll yield whatever I can. I'll just leave it with that.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Senator Friesen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in support of the motion to override. Again, we have a unique situation here that hopefully will never happen to another county again. There is a solution here. It's not an easy one. It's not a good one. He has looked at I think, all the alternatives that he can find. And until we probably step in and change our judicial system and so that this cannot ever happen again, I mean, there's opportunities for this to happen in a municipality or in a different county. When I was on the city council years ago, as I got to learn more about their processes, I found out we didn't have insurance for our police department. Hadn't had it for 20 years. Thank goodness nothing happened. That something like that could have broke the community. Things happen. There are unintended consequences. No one realizes sometimes just how important some of these things are. There was a dispute between insurance companies on who's covered, who's not. Those lawsuits have been ongoing. But again, when you have board members sometimes that you don't have your handle on all the things that need to be done, and with staff, and then you miss things, and suddenly you find out you're not covered, whatever it happens, and a bad thing happens. And it happens at the wrong time, and here's where you end up. And this is a place, I think, and they're still going to solve their own problem. They're not asking us for money. They're asking us for an opportunity to task themselves in a different way that would help to solve the problem and wouldn't put the burden on a minority. And I look at the ag community there, and I think they've had huge property taxes and increases in the past that we're still trying to address here as a body. And now you're going to dump this on top of it. We already can't compete with our neighboring states. We're not competitive at the national level with our property tax situation. And now you want to put more of that burden on the property tax owners. This is a way that gives people more of an opportunity to help contribute, to pay that bill. I think it's the right thing to do, and I will support the override. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I'd like to thank Senator Dorn for bringing this bill again. We, the people of this chamber, passed this on general 45-04. We passed it on final 43-6-0. 25% of the taxpayers, only Gage County taxpayers are liable for this, property taxpayers. They did not get to vote on this. It is hypocritical to have $3.8 million for the property taxpayers to be liable for this, and then come back and say, we want to vote on the $1.2 million that a sales tax would raise. LB 472 allows a 1/2 cent countywide sales tax across the county, effectively allowing more than 100% of the people to participate. How is this possible? The out-of-county people like myself will go into Beatrice, a regional shopping area, and spend our money and help them to defray the cost of this. I would encourage everybody to vote green on the veto override.
Thanks, Senator Brandt. Senator Groney.
Thank you, Mr. President. I fully understand that the governor is standing on principle. I applaud him. We've always in Nebraska allowed citizens to vote on sales tax increases. LB 472 creates an exception to that standard. But as I told the governor, sayings like a rock in a hard place, and there are exceptions to rules come to mind in this situation. When I look at the situation Gage County finds themselves in today, I believe Senator Dorn has shown leadership as he has handled the hand he has been given. Creating a local county sales tax approved by for this single purpose would spread the cost out over more citizens and provide for a quicker payoff. The county could have bonded the debt with a vote of the people, but that would have added cost to the taxpayers. The Supreme Court gave the county a generous interest rate of 0.004512. A bond would have been 10 times the financial cost, or more, 4.5% to 6%, plus the cost of bonding it. This is one of those times the rock and the hard place give you little choice, and I must make an exception to my principle that sales taxes should be voted on by the people. We have no choice here, folks. Senator Dorn has created the best avenue, the most financial sound, the quickest way to pay it off. He is spreading the cost over more taxpayers, more people. There will now be people traveling through his district that might pay some sales tax and help with the payment of it. It shortens the time period up to the point that this becomes the past for the people of Gage County. No, Governor, I understand your principles, and I agree with you on this, on principle, but I find myself in a rock and a hard place. And I'm going to make an exception to my rule. And by the way, there might be one more when it comes to property tax relief, about raising taxes. But when you are elected, these becomes the times when campaign promises are meaningless and situations must be solved. And I applaud Senator Dorn for the way he managed this for a rookie senator. He has done a wonderful job, and a firsthand as a county commissioner, and he has done his best to cut the costs for his taxpayers. So I will be voting red or whatever. I'm voting against the veto.
Thanks, Senator Groney. Senator Merman.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I also rise in support of the veto override. I think this situation gives us another opportunity to highlight the unfairness of property taxes in this state. Property tax owners would be unfairly targeted to pay off all of the judgment, even though they are no more responsible for what happened in the county than all the other citizens. Using property taxes to totally pay off this judgment would be unfair, just as over-reliance on property taxes to fund K-12 education in this state is unfair to property tax owners. County sales tax would be the fairest way to pay off this judgment, and I think also that Senator Dorn has explored all of the possibilities and has come up with the best way, the quickest way, the least expensive way to pay off this judgment and keep it in the responsibility of the taxpayers in Gage County. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Merman. Senator Chambers, your third opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, is Senator Dorn still available?
Senator Dorn, are you available?
Yes, be glad to.
I would like to ask you a question or two if you will yield.
Yes.
Members of the legislature, I'm doing this for a reason. I'm trying to show by example what I mean when I say this legislature should function a certain way as an institution. Senator Dorn, have I asked you for anything of any kind in return for my support of what you're doing?
No.
Senator Dorn, are you aware of how much abolishing the death penalty means to me?
I've been through the years, been able to watch that, and even in this last year, I've watched that, and then the discussion the other day on the floor, that is your most important thing.
Senator Dorn, did you vote no on advancing my bill to abolish the death penalty?
That is correct.
Did I come to you after that vote or any time between then and now and tell you I'm switching my vote because you voted against my bill? Did I do that?
No, you did not.
Thank you. Members of the legislature, we keep saying this is Senator Dorn's district. You need to stop thinking about these individuals as representing a district because they really are Nebraskans. District boundaries are artificial lines on a map These are Nebraskans, and they are facing what could be described as a crisis. So think in terms of you helping your fellow Nebraskans. You all have no idea how difficult it is for a man who is black and has lived as long as I have to transcend all of those negatives that I feel and say, I know what the right thing is for this legislature to do. And when I gave that affirmation that I would discharge the duties of this office to the best of my ability, it didn't say, because I didn't have a mental reservation, to the best of my ability, considering the fact that as a black man, the people of my kind have been abused by the other kind, so my duty is lesser than others. I didn't have that mental reservation. Most of the people that I do things for are white. Even when I get something done that benefits the black community, such as district elections for the city council, the school board, and the county board, more white people are benefited because there are more white people in Omaha, more white people have been able to get into those offices as a result. I just wish that you all, 1/10 of the time, could comport yourself when it comes to action in the way I do by my actions. Words are designed to try, to persuade, then convince you to act. But it doesn't work. But I try anyway.
1 minute.
And my actions will be what I choose to be judged by. And I will weigh the way I have acted in this legislature when it comes to supporting legislation, when it comes to killing legislation against the record of anybody who has ever served in this body. And you will not find anybody who had to overcome more personal negatives in order to do what I consider the right thing than the one who's speaking to you now. I just hate I only have 3 chances to talk because we're not going to have a chance to discuss an issue like this again in the history of this state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Hilgers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise in opposition to the motion. I was one of the 4 that Senator Brandt referenced voted no. The first time around, I didn't vote for it on general, and I voted against it on final reading. And let me start where we agree. And by the way, I think the reason I'm speaking, and I'll only intend to speak once, is just to make sure that this is on the record. But I certainly stand with Senator Lowe. I'll start with where we agree. If you want to say that Senator Dorn is a statesman through this process, I would absolutely agree. If you would say that Senator Dorn has worked through every option and avenue to try to solve this problem, you'd have no disagreement from me. I would echo that. If you want to say that the Beatrice 6 and the circumstances surrounding it were in injustice, I would agree with that. If you would say that this is unfair to property tax payers in Gage County, you would absolutely have no disagreement from me. And if you were to say that you would oppose a bill or you would seek to have a bill that would allow the sales tax to be raised with a vote of the people, I would agree with you there. Because where I part company with those who have supported this bill so far is the principle that we are deviating from a principle of allowing people to vote on it. Because ultimately, as I see it and as I hear it, the rationale for this bill is, for not having a vote, is the people will get it wrong. Now, we can articulate why this is different, and we can say this is a judgment and this will never happen again. But ultimately, what it boils down to is we don't think that the people will vote the way that we think they ought to vote. And that if they don't vote, if they would to vote it down, then they would sustain, it would be an unfair burden to property taxpayers. Ultimately, that principle is one that I don't agree with. Because if we can apply it here in this instance, we can apply it in other instances. If we think that it's going to be unfair to property tax owners, for them to only, property taxpayers, for them to shoulder the burden themselves, then we ought to believe that the people in Gage County will do the right thing if given the opportunity to vote. For that reason, I didn't support it the first time around. I agree with Senator Groney. My principles say when it comes to increasing sales tax, people ought to have the opportunity to be heard. Where I deviate is I don't think we ought to make an exception in this instance. As they say, as an old saying, I know Senator Chambers would remember this, in law school you're taught, hard cases make bad law. And what that means is if you try to implement a law or create a judicial decision to solve one really hard case, and this is no doubt a hard case, there's no doubt about it. What has happened in Gage County, what happened to these people, what happened to the property taxpayers in Gage County, it's a hard case, it's a terrible case, it's one we never want to see, and I stand with Senator Dorn in that regard. But by passing this bill, overriding this veto, what we are doing is we're putting in a principle that I think would be bad law. We are saying in the instance where we don't think the people will vote the way that we think they ought to vote, that we ought to take it out of their hands. For those reasons, I did not support the bill without the Lowe amendment the first time around, and I will vote red on the motion to override. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Hilgers. Senator Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. President. We don't have time to be freshman senators here. When you walk in the door, you are put to the task. And that is exactly what Senator Dorn did. He was put to the task and he brought forth legislation. Legislation that I don't agree with, but he did a great job. Congratulations. Maybe it's the dirty air that we're breathing in here today, or that we have been breathing, but I don't know. Today, I heard where if we increase sales tax, people will come to our stores and shop. I don't think I've ever heard that. Where if we increase the price of your goods, they're going to come to shop. That doesn't make sense to me. If we don't pass this, the people of Gage County still have the opportunity to vote this in. By the vote of the people, they can implement this. Let's not take it out of their hands. And I'm still puzzled by the increase in sales tax that would encourage people to spend money. We fight day and night about increasing other taxes and how it will hurt business, and yet we're not hearing that. I have faith in the people of Beatrice, that they know that they don't want to hurt the outlying farm people, the farmers and ranchers down there. I believe they will help their neighbors, as it should be. Let's not have them fall back on us. Let's let the people decide. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Lowe. Senator Moorfeld.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in support of the motion to override the governor's veto. Along with my colleague, Senator Groney, I saw a few heads kind of look around when he said he's voting against the veto. That means you vote aye, the green button to the left. My first year in the legislature, I accidentally, during a filibuster, said the wrong way to vote. That was on a cloture motion. And one of my only colleagues that was actually listening to me voted that way. And we lost it by one vote. So I was having a little bit of flashback. So if you're voting to override the governor's veto, that you have to vote aye. We require 30 votes. And I rise in support of Senator Groney's position on that and in support of Senator Dorn. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Moorfeld. Senator LeGrone.
Thank you, Mr. President. In Senator Groney's defense, I don't think he's ever voted green before, so that's new for him. I rise in opposition to the motion. I'm not going to repeat what Senator Lowe and Senator Hilgers have said. I completely agree with them. But I did want to point out, Senator Chambers is correct. This does give us an opportunity to discuss the legislature's institution. And something that I think we need to consider going forward, that this gives us a moment to look at, is the fact that it takes fewer votes to override a veto than it does to overcome a filibuster. I was looking and I could not find a single other legislative body in the country where that is the case. It is always a higher or equal threshold for overcoming a veto than it is for a filibuster, so I wanted to point out that that seems to be something odd in this institution. I think it changes the checks and balances that are so precious and intricate for our form of government. So I hope that that next session, really, not next session, in 2 years, when the Rules Committee meets again, that's something that they can look at and consider is that the right balance? I'm not saying it's not, I'm saying it's something simply that we should consider. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator LeGrone. Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I voted for LB 472 on each round, and I'm going to vote to override the veto as well. And I urge my colleagues' green vote on the motion to override the governor's veto. I think it's important for us to understand that our vote is not going to automatically instate a sales tax in Gage County, and I think we all know that. We're just giving this county a tool to get out of a really bad situation. And it's also really easy to assume that we're never going to be in this situation again. This is a really unique situation. And I'll just remind my colleagues that if we never want to be in this situation again, the way to get out of that is to repeal the death penalty, because that's what got us into this situation here. I spoke to all the people on my floor, up on floor 11, all my staff members and all my colleagues' staff, and as well as my staff back home at my office, and we're all really excited to go to Beatrice this summer after session gets out and go get some food and go shopping and visit Gage County and see what it's all about over there. So you're gonna have some city slickers in your county this summer, and we all look forward to supporting you. So thank you, Senator Dorn, for doing the hard work for your community. That's what we're all here to do, and I know you're doing something really difficult, and I admire that a lot, and I admire the consistency in my colleagues who are here to support you. So I urge your green vote, and I'll yield the rest of my time to Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Chambers, 3.5 minutes.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, I've studied Senator Hilgers, and I could have told you how he was going to vote. And I'm going to make a prediction. The legislature is not the last stop on his political ambition tour. I want that to sink in. He is correct. The U.S. Supreme Court itself said, and a justice who gave it in his speech, as Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. pointed out, that not only hard cases but high-profile cases make bad law. And this is why, as I pointed out, but Senator Hilgers wasn't really listening, there are some situations where the court will say, we are not saying definitively how this type of situation will be handled in the future. We take it on a case-by-case basis. This case is not precedential in the sense of binding or influencing the court to rule this way should a similar case come before the court. The court has always refused, in all of the decades that the Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution has been a part of the Constitution, they have refused to define precisely what that phrase means, how far it reaches, the kinds of situations that will be covered, and they point out that the facts of each case will determine whether or not the Eighth Amendment will apply to that case. This language does not say that a county board, by a majority vote of the members, can levy a tax like this without a vote of the people. The first hurdle is that you must have at minimum, a $25 million judgment against the county, and that's not enough. It must be a judgment rendered by a federal court. If anybody on this floor said they thought that was going to happen again in Nebraska, I'd say that person is crazy or is an outright liar. Is an outright liar. Everybody on this floor knows that we're not going to have another situation like this. I don't mean where the death penalty will be misused to extort a plea, but where a $25 million judgment will come down. First of all, you're not going to have lawyers who would continue these multiple appeals knowing there was no way to win. They handled that case so poorly and damaged their clients so much. What they did bordered not on zealous representation, but professional misconduct. Part of that bill that the county must pay goes to these lawyers. The courts even got tired of it. One of the times they came before the 8th U.S. Circuit and they said, yeah, we're very familiar with this case. That's one of the things which if Senator Hilgers paid attention to anything, he would know. And it's not likely something like this will happen again.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Clements.
Thank you, Mr. President. When LB 472 came up, I pondered it, and I very reluctantly voted yes, but I didn't really like it. The president of the legislature allowing a sales tax without a vote of the people was a real problem for me. When the condition of a $25 million federal judgment was added, I liked that. But I was still concerned. I couldn't think of any examples where that would happen. Senator Chambers is assuring us that it wouldn't ever happen. I was thinking about Omaha Public Schools and Omaha City retirement plans that are hundreds of millions in liabilities short, wondering if they could end up with a federal judgment. It's doubtful, but pensions are governed by federal laws. So I couldn't think of an example at that time, but and I still don't, but I voted yes at that time, but still one could come about, which would be a concern. And I did hear that about 20% of sales tax in Gage County would probably be paid by non-residents, and I hope the voters will vote for a county sales tax, but I'm voting no today, hoping that they will do that, but because they need a chance to do that. And this I had made my own decision. It's not from pressure from the governor. It's my own decision. When I have talked to him before, I told him I'm voting my own convictions, and I urge your red vote. And it is a rock and a hard place. Senator Groney came down on one side of the hard place, and I came down on the other. And thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Clements. Senator Groney.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Senator Moorfield for helping me clarify my earlier statement. As a politician, I'll never say I made a mistake, but I'll clarify it. But I'm going to vote green on the veto override to make sure everybody understands. One more point I'd like to make why this is fiscally sound decision too by Gage County. If they take it to a vote of the people, we're a year and a half down the road. We fall behind another year and a half. They do. There's a cost to an election that adds to the entire cost of the burden to the people of Gage County. This will expedite it, this decision by the county commissioners. It will get the payments on track quicker and the debt paid off sooner. So there's another reason why this exception makes sense, but I will vote green as the Speaker straightened me out and Senator Moorfield did, and also thank you, my colleagues, for doing that. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Senator Groney. Senator Blood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I stand in full support of Senator Dorn's motion to override the governor's veto, as well as the underlying bill. So on the day that it happened, I spoke to Senator Dorn, and I would ask that perhaps he yield to a question, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Dorn, yield, please.
Yes.
Senator Dorn, do you remember that conversation? I know you had a lot on your mind that day.
No, I do not. I remember you talked to me, but I don't remember the conversation. Yep.
Well, I'm going to have to work harder to make an impression. Thank you,
Well,
Senator.
There was too many other people talking.
No worries. I'll take it from here then. Thank you, Senator. So specifically, Statute 18-1208 was the one that I had talked to you about, and that is in reference to occupation tax. In the city of Bellevue, we've had a lot of hurdles. I always tell the story, and you've heard it multiple times, and I'm sorry I'm going to bore you to death and say it again, but when I came onto the council, we were $10 million in the hole, which seems like nothing really now when we talk about the state budget, and we had no rainy day fund. Within 2 years, we had turned that around. We had done several things to make sure that our fire department was going to be funded, and for some reason, after several of us left the council, all the plans went by the wayside. All of a sudden, they needed to do things for the fire department, and they couldn't figure out where to get the money. And one of the discussions that we had had was in reference to the restaurant tax. And so the restaurant tax in the state of Nebraska can be done by municipalities, depending on, are you a metropolitan city, are you a primary city, or are you a village? The levels change. But anything above $6 million needs to go to a vote of the people. Anything below can be done by a municipality without a vote of the people. So the reason that came to mind was in the governor's response that Nebraska has traditionally not allowed subdivisions to impose new taxes without a vote of the people. I would counter with statute 18-1208. And that is not to say anything negative about the governor. It is to question that statement, and I feel that we can show in statute that this does happen for good reasons, because that restaurant tax can be utilized to help municipalities without having to constantly go back to the citizens for more taxes. Senator Slama and Senator Moorfeld have both done a really effective job of talking about how much special elections can cost, or how ballot initiatives can cost, because it also, unfortunately, can invite in outside interests, special parties, who happen to have more money. And so although we say, well, we don't trust that the will of the people, that they'll vote in favor of this, or they won't vote in favor of something, if we could keep special interest out of a vote like that, I think the people would vote for what was right. But we can't guarantee that, and we've proven that over and over and over again in Nebraska. And no matter which side of the aisle that you fall on, there are examples from every party, every special interest group, and we can list many, many ballot initiatives that have gone one way or the other because more money was put into it. But the bottom line for why I support this is that, first of all, I have deep respect for Senator Dorn. And Senator Dorn has learned an important lesson that a lot of senators have yet to learn. And you've heard me say it. I don't represent District Carroll, District Blood. I represent District 3. And you hear me fight very hard for Sarpy County. You hear me fight very hard for District 3, because that is who I work for. Do I work for all Nebraskans? I certainly do. But I'm the voice of District 3. Senator Dorn, you have done an exceptional job being the voice of your district, of District 30. And that's what we're here to do. And it's not an awesome thing to have to stand up to a governor's veto, but you are doing it with grace and with honor, and I fully support that. Again, I am in full support of both the motion to override the veto and Senator Dorn's underlying bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Blood. Senator Breezy announced some guests today. We have with us 13 third and fourth graders from Litchfield Elementary School in Litchfield, Nebraska. And the students are with us in the north balcony. Students, please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Senator Hilgers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon again, colleagues. I appreciate the comment Senator Chambers made, and I think this is a good conversation to have, and I want to clarify what I was saying. As Senator Chambers often says, we make a record here, and this, to my point, I think this is something that future legislatures may look back upon. I want to make sure the record's clear. So the point that I was making is not that there is a good likelihood that there will be another judgment down the road, that if LB 472 becomes law, that in some time in the future this will be abused somehow because there will be some other judgment that will have to be paid and there won't be a vote from the people of Gage County or wherever that particular county that there might be a judgment. That's not my point. When I say hard cases make bad law, what I'm referring to is not this specific law. This law could be abused in the future. My point is that what we're doing is establishing a principle within this body. And the principle, as I see it articulated, and if I've misinterpreted the arguments being made, then please clarify for me. But as I've heard the argument, it is, hey, look, everyone, it seems, I think this body would agree, and maybe it'd be 49-0, to allow the citizens of Gage County to vote on a sales tax in order to help pay this judgment. The argument that I'm hearing is, well, that is not something that we should let people vote on because we're concerned that they won't do the right thing being, by implication, instituting the increased sales tax. That principle, by voting for LB 472, for me, if I'm to vote for LB 472, what I'm saying to me is that I am agreeing with the principle that in some circumstances it is okay to take the vote away from the people to increase their own sales taxes when I don't think they're going to do the right thing. Now, you could say, well, this is only limited to a judgment. That principle applies in a whole lot of other circumstances. You could imagine and say, well, people aren't going to vote for a sales tax increase when our roads are really bad. Or people aren't going to vote for a sales tax increase because they don't want a new courthouse or they don't want something else. They're not going to make the right decision. And this is really important. So because it's really important and because they're not going to make the right decision, we ought not allow them to vote. That ultimately, to me, is the principle being articulated. Now, this is an extreme case. I concede. It is, in all likelihood, a case that will never be repeated again. But that's what hard cases make bad law boils down to. The hard case will probably not be repeated again. But the principle that case sets could be repeated again. And in my view, the reason I can't vote for LB 472 is because at the end of the day, I don't think it's sufficient to say that I will agree taking the vote out of the hands of the people because I don't think they will make the right decision. That is what I'm articulating. Not that 472 itself, if put into law, would be itself abused, but the broader principle that is at stake. Again, I thank Senator Dorn and all the work that he's done. I commend him for all the work, and I feel bad being on the other side of him on this, but I have to stand on principle. With that, I yield the rest of my time to Senator Chambers.
Thanks, Senator Hilgers. Senator Chambers, 1 minute 45.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Hilgers. Senator Hilgers and I did have a chance to discuss this, and I mistook what he was trying to say when he used the expression, hard cases make bad law. I'm not going to go through all that because it'll take all my time. But the one thing I do want to say is that the legislature is to make certain decisions because it is a Republican form of government and not everything is put to a vote of the people. The Supreme Court itself had said some principles are so important they should not be left to the vicissitudes of elections or opinion polls. In other words, the governmental entity is to take the action and do the right thing. That's what we're doing here. We're not changing any general law with reference to how sales taxes are to be handled. This is one thing, one of a kind. It has been set aside and has been hedged about in such a way that it is not going to be done again, and I would bet anybody any amount of money that such is the case, and I don't think that there's anybody on the floor who thinks that this particular set of circumstances, read what Senator Dorn's bill says to find out what those circumstances are, and you'll see that it's not going to arise again, any more than you can say donkeys will fly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Speaker, you're announcing some guests today. We got with us 42 fourth graders from the Woodland Park Elementary School in Norfolk, Nebraska. Those students are all with us in the north balcony. Woodland Park fourth graders, please rise. We'd like to welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Senator Vargas.
Thank you very much, President. Try to keep this short. First, I am in support of the override for Senator Dorn, and I want to give a little context on that. And then I also want to react to something that Senator Blood mentioned, because I think we're dealing with nuance here a little bit. I think it's easy to say we come in here and there's a principled value or reason that which we apply. And I'm going to shout out Senator Groney. He may not hear me on this, but his rationale for how he got to his place for supporting the override is sound. It is pragmatic. It is very clear. There are sometimes exceptions to the rule, and that's okay. We deal with them all the time. And in this instance, I think there's a clear exception to the rule. And that should be saying a lot, because I introduced a bill to have us go to the vote of the people for cell phone taxes. And if you remember from some of my testimony and my rationale is that a very specific tax was getting a little out of hand. It was being used for a lot of wants. There was a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability. It was being passed and applied to funds, and it was being added to budgets, and unnecessarily, I was seeing a potential solution to the problem: more transparency for taxes that were getting to a place that were too high. And what we saw in the reference that Senator Blood said, that there are different classes of where you can tax. But the reason that exists is actually because of some negotiations on the same reason. But the point I'm trying to make about these occupation taxes is they were added to wants and needs for municipalities. There's a lot of things that they have to provide revenues and tools to then address something at the municipality level. This is a very unique circumstance. There's a very clear prerogative and purpose for these funds. There is a clear end date to it. It is not the only tool being utilized. It is a tool. There's not a recent memory, as actually Senator Lindstrom brought a bill to try to provide a tool to Omaha Public Schools with its pension woes. We are here to debate, and I urge you to move forward on this override, because there are not a lot of tools left in the toolbox for your county, Senator Dorn. And even though we can very easily apply a value statement and say that we're always this way or this way, I'm telling you that's not the way I'm going to vote, because the practicality is this is an extenuating circumstance that warrants a new tool and warrants an exception. So with that, I stand on the override, and I ask you to consider that we've had significant debate on this. It's the right thing to do to provide another tool, not a panacea to this problem. And I want to thank Senator Dorn for his pragmatic approach for this. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Vargas. Senator Hilger is recognized for third opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. Just to follow up on the conversation that I had with Senator Chambers, and I don't disagree with what Senator Vargas said. In fact, I don't disagree with, I think, every argument that's been made for the increase in the sales tax. What I disagree with is that we are deciding it. We are giving the power to the board to decide, and we're not allowing people to vote. Ultimately, I think that's the principle that I can't agree with. And how this would work out, by the way, you might say, well, this is a hard case. It'll never happen again. This is a judgment. It's $25 million. No, this will never happen. Well, how this thing works in a courtroom, and I know we're not in a courtroom, but this is how this thing starts. Once you make an exception, the next person who wants to apply that exception to another context will say, hey, look, well, we've used it over here. In this instance, we made an exception. So what's the harm with we'll just make an exception here. We'll just make another exception. That's okay. We'll expand the application, the exception. That's how this works. And so when I say hard cases make bad law, if we're saying here today, we don't think that the people are going to make a good decision, therefore let's do it for them, I just will predict that will be used sometime down the road in another context. And it won't be judgments. It'll be something different. And ultimately, I think we have to draw a line. In my view, I have to draw a line, and that's why I'm voting against it. By the way, I would say there might be some instances where you might want to take it out. You might want to do something different. And that might be, to Senator maybe Bostelman's point, about the timeliness. If you had an emergency where time was of the essence and you had to act immediately within a month or two and you didn't have time to wait for a vote, maybe that would be an instance in which you could say, we just don't have time to act. But in this case, this is a judgment that one way or the other is going to be paid out over a number of years, and this is not going to materially speed it up. It's not an emergency of that kind. It's a significant issue. It's a significant issue for Gage County and the residents, but we ought to let them vote. With that, I'd yield the rest of my time to Senator Chambers.
Thanks, Senator Hilger. Senator Chambers, 3 minutes.
How long?
3.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Hilgers. And the way Senator Hilders and I are dealing with each other lets you know that we have an understanding. If something is misunderstood on the floor by either of us, we will talk it out and then go on the record to make clear what it's all about. One group who should not be forgotten in this are the victims of the injustice, the official injustice. They have to be considered too. I would touch on what Senator LaGrone said about it taking more votes to end a filibuster than for the governor to override the governor. The governor is one person, he's the executive branch, and that one act of his does not hinder what he or she could do in any other situation. When we cut off debate, we're saying that the legislature can no longer function as a legislature. There can be no amendments, there can be no motions, there can be no discussion. So when you're going to take the drastic step of cutting off the ability of the legislature to legislate, and you don't understand why there are more votes than that, you don't understand government. So I'd suggest that Senator LaGrone do some reading about legislatures and why they're constructed the way they are. But another thing he has failed to look at, other legislatures have 2 houses. We have 1. When you vote to cut off debate here, that ends the debate, period, not where there are 2 houses. So these things will get by those who don't think deeply. Now, I would say this last thing. I told Senator Hilders that if another one of these situations arises, where you have a $25 million judgment minimum imposed by a federal court, you won't have to do this again because I will pay off that judgment myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Albright.
Thank you, President Foley. I do rise to, first of all, let Senator Dorn know that I do applaud him for what he's doing for his county, and sitting on the county board and understanding the situation that they're in is certainly difficult at best. And I think about the people that live in Gage County, they're the victims too. They're the victims of this cost over several years. But at the same time, I am principled in this sales tax increase. It will be for a longer period of time if the vote of the people, if they were to not vote for this tax increase. But at the same time, I can't imagine that this isn't the talk of the town, this isn't the talk of the coffee shops, this isn't, but for the citizens of that county to think it would be okay just to put it on property tax, I do believe that they should take it to the vote of the people. And you know what? It might be shot down at one time, but once they realize that they aren't going to have a lot of the nice amenities that you would normally have in a county, you may very well understand that you have to take it to the vote of the people a second time so that they understand that, you know what, we've got to figure out how to get this paid off quicker. And to do that, if they know that there's a time limit on it, you know, this judgment, I'm not exactly sure how long it's been out there, but if they're already at the max limit on their levy, these farmers are already paying, and even the folks in town. I understand, you know, we farmers outside of the big cities always feel like there's so many more of them than there are of us, and that we would automatically think that there would be, you know, an override, that there's so many of them, and that if they say no, we're going to have to pay it anyway. Well, I just am very principled that if the people say no, no means no, and you'll have to deal with it. You know, we just dealt with the NRDs on LB 177, and when the people said no, they need to figure out what else to do. But when we as a body feel like we are so much more in control of doing something over the vote of the people, they are the second house. They are the ones that we too answer to. And I was a yes in the beginning because I was hearing Senator Dorn's heart on this, but it is business, and it is the fact that that these attorneys are pressing hard on that county that they want their judgment paid and they want it paid now. Well, that's well and good, but the people of that county have to be involved because they are. I mean, you live there, you either move out or you're gonna have to pay your share. But it's gonna be on the homes and the farmers for a long time. I heard Senator Dorn talk about one farmer's gonna pay over $100,000 over this period, $100,000 over this period of time. That's a lot of money. But you know, those stories need to be told, and then the people need to go vote on their own sales tax for that area so that they hear the hearts of everyone and not just 5 people on a county board that can make that decision. So I rise in with a red light. I would like to see it go to the vote of the people and not put it on this body. You know, we've got a lot of things to talk about here in the next 20 days, and you know, one of them that I think about is the teachers in Omaha. I mean, they were not in control of what happened to their retirement, but are they going to come back to us and ask us to try to you know, make that particular problem that they're in right with them? You know, is it the citizens of Omaha that we need to take care of to make sure that we make them whole? I mean, things do happen, and they will continue to happen. But I do feel that that I think the people of that Gage County should take it to the vote of their people and work through it that way. So that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Albright. Senator Dorn, you recognize the close on your motion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues, for the discussion today. As most of you know, this bill has gone through all 3 rounds. It had the public hearing in front of the committee, and we've had a lot of discussion on this in the last probably 2-3 months. I stand in closing today, though, to encourage you to vote in favor of the motion and override the governor's veto of LB 472. This bill, LB 472, will give some tax relief to the property owners in Gage County and will help pay off this judgment sooner. Many of you have had discussions with me about a loan from the state and the effect the loan would have. This would not solve the problem of where the money would come from to pay for this judgment. It still would be paid 100% by property tax. I pray that this state never has a situation happen like the Beatrice 6 again. I pray no person ever has to go through what the Beatrice 6 went through. And I pray that a county never will go through anything like this again. This bill cannot correct all of those things. It can help pay off the judgment with something besides property taxes. I ask for your green vote on the motion, and I want to call the House in reverse order.
Thanks, Senator Dorn. There's been a request to place the House on a call. The question is, shall the House go on a call? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
31 ayes, 7 nays, Mr. President, 8 nays to place the House under call.
House under call. All senators, please return to your desk and check in. The House is under call. Senator Kavanaugh, check in, please. Senator Groney, check in, please. All members are present. The question before the body is whether or not to adopt Senator Dorn's motion to override the governor's veto. A roll call vote in reverse order has been requested. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Wishart, voting yes, Sir Williams. Voting yes, Sir Wayne. Voting yes, Sir Walls. Voting yes, Sir Vargas. Voting yes, Sir Stinner. Voting yes, Sir Slama. Voting no, Sir Shear. Voting yes, Sir Quick. Voting yes, Sir Pansing Brooks. Voting yes, Sir Merman. Voting yes, Sir Moser. Voting yes, Sir Moorfield. Voting yes, Sir McDonald. Voting yes, Sir McAllister. Voting yes, Sir Lowe. Voting no, Sir Linehan. Voting yes, Sir Lindstrom. Voting yes, Sir Lathrop. Voting yes, Sir Legrone. Voting no, Sir Coulterman. Voting yes, Sir Klowski. Voting yes, Sir Hunt. Voting yes, Sir Hughes. Voting yes, Sir Howard. Voting yes, Sir Hickelman. Voting yes, Sir Hilgers. Voting no, Sir Matt Hansen. Voting yes, Sir Ben Hansen. Voting yes, Sir Holleran. Voting yes, Sir Groney. Voting yes, Sir Gregert. Voting yes, Sir Geist. Voting no, Sir Friesen. Voting yes, Sir Erdman. Voting no, Sir Dorn. Voting yes, Sir DeBoer. Voting yes, Sir Crawford. Voting yes, Sir Clements. Voting no, Sir Chambers. Voting yes, Sir Kavanaugh. Voting yes, Sir Breesy. Voting yes, Sir Brewer. Voting Sir Brewer. Voting yes, Sir Brandt. Voting yes, Sir Bostelman. Voting yes, Sir Bowles. Voting yes, Sir Blood. Voting yes, Sir Arch. Voting yes, Sir Albright. Voting no. 41 ayes, 8 nays on the motion that Legislative Bill 742 become law, notwithstanding the objections of the governor.
The motion is adopted. I raise the call. All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. I do hereby sign the motion. Members will return to the agenda where we left off. But first, we'll do items for the record.
Mr. President, Revenue Committee, I believe, I think they're meeting in executive session in room 2022 now. Revenue now in 2022. The amendments, I have amendments to be printed to 334 and 334A. There's your copy. Make sure that's the right letter. Why do I have 3 of them? Oh. Mr. President, returning to Legislative Bill 901, I'm sorry, 149. 901 is the committee amendment. 149 by Senator Quick. I now have pending an amendment from Senator Quick, floor amendment 62.
Senator Quick, you're recognized to open on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. So over the time we had off to work on Senator Dorn's veto override, I sat down with talked with Senator Wayne, some others who were opposed to the some of the language in my bill, and so I agreed to remove the language that would to include the Nebraska Clean and Air Act. I think it's important for me specifically to make sure we can address the issues that we're facing in our schools. So I'm okay with the age of 19, going to the age of 19, and then also having them licensed and regulated by the state of Nebraska. I think going forward, we can work on it in the future on how we can help with some of the areas where they want to have a vape store that can, or a place that they would be able to vape. But removing the Clean Indoor Act will help remedy, and I think that'll help pass the bill forward. And I think that's the most important thing to do right here, just so we can help our children. That was my main objective with this bill. And so with that, I hope everyone will vote green on this amendment as well as 901 and also on 149. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Quick. Is there any discussion of the amendment or the bill? I see none. Senator Quick, you recognize to close on FA 62. He weighs closed, and the question for the body is the adoption of FA 62. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
30 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of the amendment to the committee amendments.
FA 62 is adopted. We're back on LB 149 with the pending committee amendments. Is there any further discussion? Senator Breezy, you recognize to close on the committee amendment AM 901.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm generally supportive of AM 901. I'm good with raising the age to 19. I believe it's narrowly tailored to meet what I perceive as the original objective of the bill, and that was to reduce vaping use among young folks, especially in our schools. The ends definition is solid in there, and reasonably good legislation. I'll support it. I'd ask for your support also of the amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Breezy. Question for the body, adoption of the committee amendment, AM 901. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
39 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the committee amendments.
AM 901 committee amendment as adopted. Continue discussion of the bill as amended. Senator Clements.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Breezy yield to a question?
Senator Breezy, would you yield, please?
Yes.
This has been a long discussion with a lot of different issues back and forth. And can you tell me, if this bill passes now, what age will be the legal age for smoking and vaping?
19.
Age 19.
Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Senator Wayne, in his amendment, he had a provision in there to grandfather in those that attain age of 18 prior to the operative date of the bill. That's no longer in there. Possibly something to consider on select.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clements and Breezy. Senator Quick, you recognize to close on the advance of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I hope you'll all vote green on LB 149. I would ask you to, and at least we can help keep these products out of our children's hands by raising the vaping age, or the age that they can purchase these products. And also, they'll be licensed and registered in the state of Nebraska. So with that, thank you, and I urge you to vote green on LB 149.
Thank you, Senator Quick. As you heard the debate on LB 149, the question for the body is advance of the bill to ENR initial. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
40 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of the motion to advance the bill.
LB 149 advances. Proceeding on the agenda to LB 532.
Mr. President, 532 was a bill originally introduced by Senator Kavanaugh. It's a bill for enacting the protection orders. It changes provisions relating to harassment protection orders, sexual assault protection orders, and domestic abuse protection orders. Bill was introduced on January 22nd. At that time, referred to the Judiciary Committee. The bill was advanced to general file. I do have committee amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Kavanaugh, you recognized to open on LB 532.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm proud to bring you LB 532. I'm incredibly grateful to Senator Hilkeman for prioritizing this bill in the Judiciary Committee, to the Judiciary Committee for voting the bill out unanimously, and to everyone who played a part in making this bill a reality. This bill cleans up, clarifies, and streamlines the statutes guiding the issuance of protection orders. The bill's primary intent is to provide more clarity in the process for victims who often pursue these protection orders without the assistance of an attorney, and also for the court system so they can make these life or death decisions with the best information to guide their deliberations. A common question in the work to support victims of violence: why didn't she just leave? With domestic violence, a disruption in a feeling of control for the abuser is the most dangerous moment for the victim. Survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence report that the decisions to leave an abusive relationship often escalates physical violence, as well as mental and emotional abuse from the offender. In particular, the time period directly following a victim's decision to leave an offender is the high-risk time period for homicide. Since a victim's choice to leave a violent situation creates a particularly high risk of future violence, protection orders are absolutely critical to helping victims access safety for themselves and their family. However, protection orders will not be effective if survivors aren't presented with an understandable and clear process to obtain an order. LB 532 seeks to make the process as clear as possible for survivors to protect themselves and their families, but also to support the courts to have the information they need to offer appropriate measures of safety and protection to such victims. This bill was drafted with input from those who work directly to provide legal assistance to victims of domestic and sexual violence, as well as experts in best practices for systemic responses to such violence. The type of protection order a victim will seek depends upon the specifics of their situation, and the legal basis differs for issuing these orders. There are three primary types of protection orders: harassment protection orders, sexual assault protection orders, and domestic abuse protection orders. I've included a fact sheet with a brief explanation of the types of protection orders that the pages are passing out. Additionally, they are passing out articles about a recent incidence of a dismissed protection order without an explanation, and they are passing out what the dismissal looked like. Often survivors of violence feel they cannot leave abusive situations out of fear for their own safety or that of their children and other family members. Protection orders are often the first attempt by survivors to seek legal protection from their abusers. This can be a terrifying and dangerous time for survivors, as it represents taking back control of their lives from their abuser. For victims, a protection order is more than a piece of paper. It is a plan and a path for safety for themselves and their children. When a victim courageously speaks up and asks for help, we must ensure that they are heard and that the process is as simple and clear as possible. Someone's life could depend on it, and often does. One of the examples being handed out indicates that. And I would like to share with you the story of Janet and Amanda from Janet's sister, Pam, who is here with us today. Dear Senators, I'm writing regarding the Protection Order Bill, LB 532. My family has been deeply affected by the current law that denied my sister Janet Franksbaum a protection order in hearing. She was denied without any reason or help to further her claim. Janet believed her estranged husband would set their house on fire and included that in her request for a protection order that was dismissed by the court without an opportunity for her pleas for safety to be heard by a judge. On February 25th, that's exactly what he did, with Janet and their daughter Amanda standing next to him, trying to get the lighter away from him. I believe the current system failed them and others just like them. We need to change the law so every person can have a hearing to determine if a protection order should be granted or not. There should be an ability to follow up to their request for help. I cannot for the life of me understand why a judge would deny Janet's claim. I believe if the judge would have heard Janet in court, she would have given the protection order and the fire would not have happened. The police were called to Janet's home that night, and the police left him there after they heard the abuse he did that night. Within an hour, the house was set on fire. With a protection order, he would have been taken to jail and not allowed around them. They were afraid, and they tried to reach out for help from our legal system, who ultimately let them down. If our legal system cannot help them or protect them, who can? Now Janet is suffering third-degree burns on 60% of her body. She's in critical condition after 6 weeks and has gone through multiple surgeries with many more to go. She's unable to move, to talk or move. This is heartbreaking and painful for the entire family. Please help families like mine so this never happens to anyone ever again. Sincerely, Pamela Sorgan. Thank you, Pamela, for your words to this body today. And thank you for being here today, advocating on behalf of your sister and other victims. I've given you all a copy of the order dismissing Janet's petition without a hearing. I would like you to look at the section where the reason given for the dismissal is. It's blank. There's nothing to tell Janet why it was dismissed, nothing to tell her what her next step was, nothing to tell her how she could keep her daughter safe. Janet and Amanda deserve better than that, and not just them. There are so many survivors of domestic and sexual violence through Nebraska who need help this bill offers. I ask for your vote on LB 532 and the committee amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Kavanaugh. Before proceeding, Senator Kavanaugh announces some guests visiting today. We have with us Pamela Sorgan, Amanda Boehm, Susan Thurman, and Elizabeth Power, all from the greater Omaha area. Those guests are with us under the north balcony. I think we'd ask them to please rise. We could welcome you all to the Nebraska Legislature. As the clerk indicated, there are amendments from the Judiciary Committee. Senator Lathrop, you're recognized to open the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, colleagues. The Judiciary Committee voted to amend LB 532 with AM 674 and advance the bill on 8-0 votes. AM 674 replaces the original bill. There are 3 main changes in the amendment. The most significant change is to remove the requirement for evidentiary hearings on all harassment protection orders. The other 2 changes rework language to clarify that any petition dismissed without a hearing is to be dismissed without prejudice, and that the petitions and affidavits are to be admitted into evidence at show cause hearings. With that, I would appreciate your support of AM 674, and I would encourage your support of LB 532 as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lathrop. Debate is now open on LB 532 and the pending committee amendment. Senator Hilkeman.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I prioritized LB 532 because I believe it supports the safety and protection of individuals and families who are victims of violence. Prior to the session, I had the opportunity to meet with a constituent whose sister was a victim of prolonged harassment and violence. She was tragically shot and killed by her abuser in a murder-suicide in May of 2018 in Lyons, Nebraska. Her brother reached out to me out of a desire to improve our legal system so that it can offer better protection for victims of violence who are scared for their safety and that of their family. In Omaha, we have seen a very recent example of a victim requesting protection from the court system and having that request denied, to a tragic result. Janet Frakes Boehm's husband, Carl Boehm, set fire to their home with she and her daughter still inside. In February 2019 of this year, Janet had requested a protection order on behalf of herself and her 17-year-old daughter without any opportunity to speak to a judge. In Janet's request for a protection order, she specifically expressed a fear that her husband would burn the house down. In previous occasions, he threatened to burn down the house. On several occasions, he told me, "I can kill you. I will chop your hands, feet, and head off so that they cannot identify the body when it is found." And yet the request for a protection order was denied. On the night of the fire, Omaha Police Department had been called to the house for a disturbance. However, Carl Boehm was not removed from the home by the police because there was no protection order in place. Investigators believe 65-year-old Carl Boehm started his family's home on fire just after midnight when his wife and 18-year-old daughter were inside. Janet's sister is also a constituent of mine and wrote to me that Janet is suffering from these third-degree burns over 60% of her body. She struggles every day to survive. She's still in critical condition after 6 weeks and has gone through multiple surgeries with many more ahead. She's yet unable to talk or move. Janet's sister wrote me, they were afraid and they tried to reach out for help from our legal system, who ultimately let them down. If our legal system cannot help them to protect them, who can? For me, LB 532 represents strengthening a path to safety for victims of violence, and that is why I have chosen to prioritize this important bill. Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Thanks, Senator Hilkeman. Senator Slama.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief with my comments. In short, this bill with the committee amendment clarifies, simplifies, and strengthens the process of getting legal protection if you're a survivor of harassment, domestic abuse, and sexual assault. It also streamlines the process for the courts by providing the court with information needed to make the determinations necessary and unifies the processes among the 3 different types of protection orders. The handout provided by Senator Kavanaugh is very helpful in explaining what this bill does. This is a necessary and well-written bill. I commend Senator Kavanaugh for her efforts on this bill, and I encourage a green vote on both LB 532 and the committee amendment AM 674. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Slama. Is there further discussion? Speaker Scheer.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's not often that I get up and speak on a bill, and I was back here reflecting on my own history. My wife volunteered for a number of years for a place for women to go from domestic abuse. And Chris was a nurse and had met a young lady at the hospital in Norfolk, became good friends. She was married to an individual. They had 3 small children, probably the time of the incident, I would guess the oldest daughter was maybe 10 or 11 years old. The youngest was 5 or 6. And she tried desperately to leave, and he continued to make threats. And she was afraid that if she left, that her children would be at risk, and she couldn't afford to do that. And one night, I believe it was a Thursday night, we got a call from a friend that Chris and she went over to the home to pick up the children because he had killed this young lady, her husband. They didn't know where he was at. He had took off. He had left the children in the same home as the body. Children were taken to their grandparents in a small community by Norfolk. And They did not find the individual for a period of days, and he was finally found on a farm south of Pilger. He had hung himself. Cowardly act after he took the wife of a young woman. There are important issues that we face, and there's a lot that we can all agree on. There's some that we won't agree on, but certainly this is one that does touch me in this position that I felt compelled to stand today. And in honor of her, I would wish that we move forward with this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Balsaman.
Thank you, Mr. President. With Senator Lathrop, yield to a question.
Senator Lathrop, yield, please.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. We're talking off the mic here just a second ago. The question comes back to our western part of the state and the circuits as they come around, and I think it's on page 8, line 13 that we're talking about. Is that correct?
That's right.
And we're looking at a 14 days requirement in there, just making sure that this is not something that would affect the circuit, the court that's out there, that we're taking a look at that if that needs to be changed, if that does cause problems for the court, that you're willing to address that.
Yeah, so your question relates to if a sexual assault protection order is not issued ex parte, then the court shall immediately schedule an evidentiary hearing to be held within 14 days. Your concern, as I understand it, is out in western Nebraska when they're riding the circuit, are they around every 14 days so that they can actually schedule a hearing in a timely and compliant fashion? And that I'll check on before select file. That's a great question. I assume that the judges are in town, but if they're in one county trying a jury trial and they don't get over to Cherry or Morrill County or somewhere else frequently enough, I'll make sure that's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. You'll address my time back to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Balsaman of Lathrop. Senator Lathrop, you recognized to close on Judiciary Committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. This is an important bill, and I had some questions off the mic. Before we start doing protection orders, like the police would show up, a husband and wife are getting a divorce, and the husband's standing out in the front lawn, he's banging on the door, and the police would basically say, okay, ex-husband or soon-to-be ex-husband, go on home. You know, you need to leave. They really didn't have any hammer or any way to intervene in that domestic dispute in a meaningful way. When protection orders came along, it allowed law enforcement to say, I'm taking you in, you've just violated a protection order. So this is an important step in protecting people in these three different circumstances. What 532 does and 674, the amendment, is it takes care of some holes that we've seen. When one of these things, basically what happens is people go in without the help of a lawyer, they fill out a form, it's put in front of a judge, and if a judge doesn't see that all the right things are in the form, the judge will simply say, denied. And the person who asked for it really doesn't have any information on how do I do this better. What this amendment allows in LB 532 is you get another chance. You're not dismissed with prejudice, but without prejudice, which means you still have an opportunity to come back, clean it up, typically with the help of somebody like the Women's Fund or one of those type of organizations. And you put in the kind of information a judge really needs to see in order to grant one of these, and then it gets better. I think this is a good addition, a good amendment to the existing law and protection orders. I would encourage your support of AM 674 and LB 532. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lathrop. Members, the question for the body is the adoption of the Judiciary Committee Amendment, AM 674. Those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
41 ayes, no nays on the adoption of committee amendments.
Committee amendments are adopted.
Senator Kavanaugh, I had AM 54, but I understand you wish to withdraw that.
Yes.
I have nothing further on the bill, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on LB 532? I see none. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized to close on the advance of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. So last week, Senator Howard talked about how this body is a family. Sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't. But today, I am grateful and I am proud to stand with all of you on this very important piece of legislation. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes horrible things to get us to change things to make them better. Speaker Scheer spoke to that in his personal interaction with this type of legislation. Janet's family, who's here today, knows all too well how important this legislation is. And all month I've been getting on this microphone and talking about April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and so it feels a bit poignant that this bill would come on the last day of April. And I will just close by reading the resolution that I submitted today. Whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is a campaign to raise public awareness about sexual violence and educate communities on how to prevent it. Whereas sexual assault is a serious and widespread issue, as 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of sexual violence in their lifetime, and 1 in 6 women, and 1 in 33 men have experienced an attempted or completed rape. Whereas silence and lack of knowledge about sexual assault play a large part in why it persists, in building awareness, we can end the shame and stigma with which survivors are burdened. Whereas preventing sexual assault means stopping sexual violence before it even has a chance to happen, and will require changing the social norms that allow it to exist in the first place, from individual attitudes, values, and behaviors to laws, institutions, and widespread social norms. Today, we all get to participate in doing something for the people of Nebraska, both men and women, victims alike. And I couldn't be prouder to have been a part of this, and I am so grateful to the Judiciary Committee and the advocacy groups that I have worked with, and to this body. And I hope you will all push a green light for LB 532. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Kavanaugh. The question for the body is the advance of LB 532 to our initial. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted here too? Record, please.
41 ayes, no nays on the advancement of 532.
LB 532 advances. Proceeding to LB 532A. Mr. Clerk.
532A by Senator Kavanaugh is a bill for an act to appropriate funds to aid in carrying out the provisions of LB 532.
Senator Kavanaugh, you recognized to open LB 532A.
Thank you. This is a $75,000 allocation to update the Supreme Court estimates it needing for modifications to their case management system, and I encourage everyone to vote green on this.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the A bill? Senator Kavanaugh, you recognized to close. She waives close and question for the body is the advance of LB 532A to ENR initial. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted here too? Record, please.
34 ayes, no nays on the advancement of 532A.
532A advances. Proceeding on the general file 2019 committee priority bills, LB 492. Mr. Clerk.
492 is a bill by Senator Wayne relating to municipalities. It adopts the Regional Metropolitan Transit Authority Act. It changes the provision relating to the creation of a Metropolitan Transit Authority, provides a maximum property tax levy for a Regional Metropolitan Transit Authority. Bill was introduced on January 22nd, referred to the Urban Affairs Committee, advanced to general file. There are Urban Affairs Committee amendments pending.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Wayne, you recognized to open LB 492.
Thank you, members of the legislature. Thank you, Mr. President. LB 492 is a bill that is long time coming for the city of Omaha. It is designed to address the structural issues of our transit authority statutes that the state's only transit authority in Omaha, Metro Area Transit. Members should have received a nice little handout from the Omaha World Herald. It was an article that was pretty interesting, and you should read it while I talk because it kind of outlines the problems that we have in Omaha. What happened was an Omaha man named Don Ferree, Ferree, who gave up cars for Lent, and he decided to travel using our public transportation system. He lives on 108th and Fort, and if you want to know where that's at, it's pretty much kind of in the middle of Omaha now that we have grown as far as the Elkhorn area. And what this article demonstrates is the issues we have currently with our public transportation system. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them quickly. On page 3, he spends hours planning his bus routes. He waited for buses, got lost during his time during Lent, missed buses, sprinted after buses, and even chased down and jogged many miles for buses. And I'm going to highlight a couple of these. He was out at Burke High School, and he was trying to figure out how to get downtown to TAC building. He wasn't sure how long it was going to take. This is a person with a college degree, studying maps, Google Maps, and everything, trying to time how to get down there. He was way off. He had to go back the next day after spending 2 to 3 hours to figure out how to stop and get some lunch because maybe he can kill some time. What made matters worse, on page 3, it'll tell you that he had to go to Bellevue, and it took 4 hours to get there one way. From Omaha to Bellevue, it took 4 hours to get there. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because when you start thinking about those who we're trying to move mass people to jobs across Omaha, they can't get there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I implore everyone to read this quick read because it really highlights the problems. Because at one point he ran from Papillion High School all the way down to 72nd and Dodge. It's a 7-mile run because he was afraid he was going to miss the bus on 72nd and Dodge. And actually, when he got there, he still took him an hour to get 2 miles away from his home, and he had to walk 2 miles in the middle of the night at midnight to get home. Now imagine single mothers, single fathers, working families trying to figure out how to get to a job such as Facebook or those areas out in South Sarpy where bus lines somewhat run and we can't get there. This fall, we did an interim study, LR 399, in the Urban Affairs, and we looked at the regional transportation system in the Omaha metro area, and what we found out was some key flaws in our current law. First, we held the hearing across the street from Emmanuel Hospital on Sorensen Parkway, which is a huge thoroughfare for Omaha, and we started it at 7 o'clock at night. The bus route stopped at 6. Across the street from Omaha on a main street. Another nugget you should know that in Omaha, if it's a holiday, particularly a federal holiday, buses don't run. So imagine on 4th of July, families wanting to get together without transportation. Imagine if you get that overtime call to go work at UNMC and you can't get there because you don't have public transportation. This is a critical flaw. What we also found out is that while the Transit Authority was amended in 2003, in an attempt to authorize the transition of Metro Transit to a regional transit authority, the statutory mechanism has been found to be completely unworkable and no effort has been made to expand transit regionally. However, there is a clear need for transportation services outside of Omaha because we currently offer lines, or Metro does. They have contracts with the city of Bellevue, La Vista, Papillion, and Ralston, and even in the Council Bluffs. They are fixed routes paid for by those local governments through a contract. Nevertheless, in 1997, transit authorities have technically lacked one key thing, and that is their own tax levy. Effective Metro Transit's current tax levy is inside the city of Omaha and inside the Douglas County levy. Instead of setting their own levy, transit authorities must make a tax request to the municipalities or counties, and if the request is granted, that is how they're funded. Now, let me talk about this process just for a little bit. Currently, Metro's budget is $32 million. Now, I want to put this in comparison with what Omaha Public Schools spends on busing kids throughout Omaha Public Schools. That is actually $36 million. We spend more on busing kids to make sure that we have diversity in our schools, and some other things around our school system than actually moving people. That's how much we spend on busing. LB 492 would adopt a Regional Metro Transit Authority Act and provide a mechanism for the creation of a regional transit authority in Nebraska. Specifically, this act will provide a process by which an existing transit authority, Metro, can become a regional transit authority. Municipalities within the same metropolitan statistical area, MSA, as a transit authority may elect to join the current authority as it converts to a regional mass transit authority. Creating or joining the MRTA would require 2/3 of a supermajority vote. Sorry, somebody from my office was calling. 2/3 of a supermajority vote from their city council, village board of trustees, or existing transit authority board. RMTAs would be governed by a 7-member elected board of directors. The current transit authority is governed in Omaha by a 5-member board appointed by the mayor and requires confirmation by both city council and Douglas County commissioners. Moving to an elected board ensures that all residents have adequate representation in the governing structure. While RMTAs would have their own tax authority, the maximum levy limit is identical to the maximum tax request that is allowed currently under state statute underneath our transit authority laws. LB 492 will also allow a RMTA to consider light rail and other transit options, the language that is also mirroring what's in current statutes. Importantly, LB 492 does not mandate the creation of any RMTA. It is up to local officials to decide whether they want transit as their priority and warrants the establishment of such a regional transportation system. I believe if we are truly into or considering or want economic development in our metropolitan areas, we have to give local governments the tools to create a robust regional transportation system. Currently, statutory structures inhibits the development of a regional transit, which consequently limits Omaha in the ability to recruit. At least 28 states allow some other region transit authority, including not just the blue states, but the red states like Arkansas, Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, South Carolina, Texas, West Virginia. LB 492 was advanced out of Urban Affairs on a unanimous 7-0 vote, and with that, I urge your green support to move LB 492 to select file. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. As the clerk indicated, there are amendments from the Urban Affairs Committee. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to open the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the legislature. What you see before you in the amendment AM 628 is a white copy amendment that replaces the bill in makes two primary changes. First, AM 628 limits the bill to allowing existing transit authorities to convert to a regional mass transit authority. The green copy of the bill would have authorized the creations of RMTAs in Lincoln and Grand Island MSAs. But concerns were raised in the committee about the impact of creating a new authority in those areas and what was really going on in those communities. So we limit it to just Omaha's MSA. Second, AM 628 makes a series of technical changes designed to ensure that the transition from existing transit authority to the regional authority works smoothly. Metro area transit was originally neutral on the bill, but with many of the corrective and harmonizing changes, they have now moved to proponents. Importantly, the vast majority of the language that is in both the green copy and the amendment is literally copied section by section from our current transit statutes. Because LB 492 does not require Metro Transit to transition into a regional authority, we had to duplicate their existing powers to the new act. And again, I think this is really important when we start talking about transportation and economic development. Most economic development occurs around our transportation hubs and our transportation infrastructures. And the fact of the matter is in order for Omaha to grow as a state, in order for us to collect more jobs and bring more employers, we have to have a public transportation system. There's an old saying that if you miss your bus and another one doesn't come within 15 minutes, then you really don't have a public transportation system. In Omaha, Nebraska, today, if you miss your bus, you call in sick because your next bus won't come for 2 or 3 hours. Sometimes not even at all if it's a special route. You're done. We want to grow And if we want to grow as a state, I would implore you to go look at the Amazon rankings when they were ranking cities and look at where Omaha ranked when we put our bid in. Public transit was way down on the list. We spend more on parking per month, individuals, taxpayers, in downtown Omaha than we do as a city on public transportation. We can do better, and it starts with this bill allowing the local government the option to become a regional transportation system. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Debate is now open. Bill 492. Senator Geist.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'll just start my conversation with thanking Senator Wayne because I do appreciate what he does for his community. And we've had conversations off the mic for the past couple of years about that. However, in this case, I am opposed to AM 628 and LB 492. And the reason is because this act expands a current power. It adds a new layer of government. Currently, the bonding or the taxing authority is 5 cents on the $100, and this broadens that to 10 cents on the $100. This board is given very broad powers in this act. It's given the power of eminent domain. We've had conversations about that on the floor of this session. And in a time that we're feverishly trying to reduce property taxes, this could likely impose new and broader property taxes upon the citizens. The board that this establishes can also partner with JPAs and interlocal agreements, and in my opinion, that also further broadens their power. As a matter of fact, I brought a bill addressing the JPAs this session, Bill LB 412, and that bill would have required that it takes a vote of the people to even form a JPA. So because of the broadening of powers, the ability to tax and add a new property tax, a broader property tax to the citizens that this would affect. And I will acknowledge this does not include the city of Lincoln, though the day would come that that could easily happen. I just stand in opposition to this bill. Again, I'll qualify that I do appreciate what Senator Wayne does for his district. I know that that's the emphasis here. I know that that's why he brought this bill. However, I can't agree with the method and the broadening of the property taxes that this would impose. And with that, I will cede the rest of my time to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Geist. Senator Hickleman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to add a little levity to our conversation here today, and I appreciate Senator for bringing this bill. And Senator Wayne, you see me over once in a while walking around my little earbuds in and so forth. One of the things I enjoy doing is I like to listen to history. And I want to just share with you when we had when you were talking about, and you brought this article from Matt Hansen relative to this guy having a hard time getting around the city using our metropolitan system. Reminded me of a story that the lecturer had when I was walking Sunday morning. He talked about the early 1900s, and he talked about a gentleman by the name of Albert Augustus Pope. Now, you may not know who Albert Augustus Pope was, but he was the guy that brought the bicycle to the to the United States. And if you'll remember, the first bicycles that used to have the very high wheels and a very small. And when those bicycles were there, one of the problems is that they weren't real practical, because if you fell, there were lots of injuries that could occur. And I know a little bit about bicycle injuries. But Pope was the one who brought bicycles in with the smaller wheels in the front and the smaller wheels in the back. And it was also because this was the very first that we had any precision tooling that could be done, and they could reproduce those. But at either rate, the reason the bicycle was very popular at the time that it was this was the first opportunity that people could travel any distance without walking or using a horse and buggy, because everything else they had to go by rail, and you'd have to go from station to station. And so you could use the bicycle and you could go to different parts of the community and it gave the people a new freedom, and that's why bicycles were very popular when they were early on in their and so, Senator, we need to continue to keep looking at ways to improve our transportation system and getting people to work. And so I'm going to be supporting this measure. And one of the other little stories I'll just tell you, of that same era, and also because of the fact that we had Tool and Dyers, was that Isaac Singer at that time developed the Singer sewing machine. And 3 things that Isaac Singer did that made the Singer sewing machine popular was he was the first person who merchandised them so that you could buy them on a monthly basis. He also was the first person to franchise, and thirdly, he was the guy that set up stores and had people working right at the front, so that they were doing that. So as people passed by, they could see people using the sewing machine, and so they would stop in and see how the people, so they could discuss how they could make their things at home. So a little bit of the marketing that was going on in the early 1900s, and with that, I will yield any time to Senator Wayne if he would like.
Thank you. Senator Wayne, 125.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Senator Hilkeman. I just want to bring up a couple points that Senator Geis brought up, and I think they're valid points. But those points need to be understood in the context of the current law. The current law right now allows transit authority for a tax ask of up to 10 cents. They're only asking for roughly 5.5 cents split between the city of Omaha and Douglas County. We are copying existing statute. That's all we're doing. So the current taxes will be the same if they are in Douglas County or the city of Omaha. Where there is an issue, and I've been clear about this, is if the city or municipality outside of the city of Omaha wants to join, absolutely, there will be a new property tax, but it only is because of a 2/3 vote by their local city council. That is the safeguard. It's a supermajority. But here's the issue. We never ask for a vote of a people except for a bond on property taxes. It's always up to the local government, the local county. The local county decides what your levy limit is. The local municipality decides what your levy limit is. They go up or down with just a simple majority vote. We are requiring a supermajority vote to just join.
Time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wayne and Senator Hickelman. Senator Hughes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was wondering if Senator Wayne would yield to some questions, please.
Senator Wayne, would you please yield?
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. So I have not gotten all the way through the bill, but would you explain to me what the statutory changes that we need to make in order to create this Metropolitan Transit Authority, please?
So currently, if City of La Vista or Papillion wanted to join the Metro Transit, they can. The issue is, and the reason they don't, is because there's no representation. So if Papillion were to join, they would still be appointed and confirmed by the mayor and the city of Omaha and Douglas County. It would only be to the next time if the mayor chooses to appoint somebody for their district.
Okay.
So people felt it was a taxation without representation.
Right. Okay, I understand that point. Thank you for clarifying that. So there are the surrounding communities to the Omaha metropolitan area are part of the transit authority now. They're buying in. Is that an accurate statement?
So those areas who have bus lines are using a contract. So they've contracted out with Metro to run bus lines to their areas.
So the bus lines, it is a coordinated effort across the metropolitan
Correct.
footprint at this point. It's just not working very well.
Correct.
So how is this Metropolitan Transit Authority going to work better?
Because it will be an elected board where they're required to work together as a board for each individual area. So if Papillion comes on, they'll have an elected person from that area to make sure things are moving better.
So currently the controlling board is appointed by the mayor of Omaha.
Yes.
And so Omaha has really good bus service, and anybody that contracts with them does not?
No, I wouldn't say really, wouldn't say really good, but as you demonstrated in the story, to get to Papillion, about 6 o'clock, all the lines kind of get limited outside of Omaha.
Okay, I guess I'm really struggling with how creating this extra layer of government is going to make it that much better than what we're doing now.
Because it's actually not an extra layer of government. We're moving it from an appointed board to an elected board that allows the board to be bigger in the sense of if more people come on.
Okay, so then I want to talk a little bit about the taxing authority. Currently, they're using, you said 5 cents, but it's coming under the city's levy limit?
Yes.
But this bill would raise that to 10 cents.
No, actually, the current language is 10 cents. They're just currently only asking for 5. So the current law says they can ask up to 10 cents. We're mirroring that same language, but they're only currently asking for 5.
But it does have to be under the city's levy limit. And the 10 cents you're asking for would be a new tax outside of the city's levy limit. Is that correct?
Correct.
So this 10 cents, what kind of how many dollars are we talking? Is this enough to develop light rail in the metropolitan area?
No, this current tax base, even if they were to go to 10 cents, which nobody's proposing that, is not enough to develop light rail. The key is that if Sarpy County wants to grow into public transit, they have to have a new tax base or a bigger tax base, but they also have to be elected. The issue is there's no accountability on Sarpy's count. It's just a contract. So they want to grow. They want an elected board that they can vote on.
So this 10 cents is basically for operation, not for necessarily expansion?
It'll be for operation currently, but if they were to, so if Papillion becomes a part of this regional transit, then that taxing authority would also go to Papillion. So yes, Papillion would see an increase. Omaha would not. What I'm saying is Omaha would not see one because it's already within the Douglas and Sarpy count.
So this would be 10 cents on the Omaha metropolitan area. If Papillion voted to join, it would be 10 cents additional on the Papillion, La Vista, everybody that joined.
It could potentially if they were up to 10 cents, but again, they're only using 5 cents of their legal authority.
Okay, so Senator Geis mentioned eminent domain.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hughes and Senator Wayne. Senator Wayne, you're next in the queue.
Okay. So just to clarify what's going, and I'm sending out a section by section. So just to clarify some of the questions about the tax issue. So for the city of Omaha, for those who are thinking this is going to be above, that current ask goes away. So the new, if you want to call it, the different tax would be the Regional Transit Authority. What the ask that was going to City of Omaha and Douglas County would go away. So theoretically, it's a wash in Omaha. The only place, let me be clear, the only place this could be an issue, and this was my conversation with Senator Arch, was outside of the Omaha area. And that is why we added the supermajority vote, to make sure that those outside of the area understand if they vote on this, that it carries a little more weight. Inside the Omaha area, nothing changes. It's only outside the Omaha area. But let's face it, south of Omaha is where the growth is happening. You have right now Facebook and Google who are building database centers who have over 50 to 60 jobs that are currently available that people can't get to. You have UNMC in the heart of Omaha where people from North Omaha who live 10 miles away can't get to. You have Bellevue that people can't get to. If we're going to get serious about, and it goes back to the big question here, colleagues, Is Omaha urban or not? Are we going to be an urban city and have urban things, or are we going to pretend to say we're still a small town and everybody can get around on foot? We know that's not the case. We've seen too many businesses come in and say transportation is a problem. If you have a workforce in your highest unemployment areas in North and South Omaha, and you have jobs in Southwest Omaha and you can't get there, then what's the point? What's the point of us coming there when we can't fill the jobs? That is the issue. So we are trying to create a mechanism that gives tools to their local city councils and villages around the Omaha area to decide, do you want to be a part of it or not? And if you want to be a part of it, yes, you have to pay the costs. And if you pay the costs, we are going to increase the service around. It makes no sense in this day and age that it takes 4 hours for somebody to get to 108th and Fort. To put that in perspective, when you're taking the interstate and you're going on the west side going towards 680, it's 680 and Fort. You got a half a mile before you get to 108th. That it takes 4 hours to get to Bellevue. How do we ever expect to attract a real business? How do we expect to attract a Toyota or a Mazda to do a mega site in South Sarpent when we can't get people there? This isn't just about my community. The reason this is an urban affairs priority, because this is an Omaha issue. That if you miss a bus, you have to call in sick. If it's snowing and the bus doesn't make it, you have to call in sick or lose your job. In 2019, we're going to say we have Omaha, Nebraska, and we're an urban place, and we're trying to grow and do these wonderful things, but you don't have a bus system. You don't have a bus system that runs buses every half hour. And if that's what we're saying, that's what this body wants to say, then we have to rethink economic development. We have to rethink the Imagine Act and everything else, because what's the point of bringing people in here if we can't move people to the area?
1 minute.
This isn't a college where everybody stays on campus. This is a fundamental issue in Omaha, and it's not, again, this is not just my community. To be quite frank, we don't have the jobs in my community to make this a my community issue. The problem is we have to go out to Gretna, Papillion, La Vista to go to work. And we can't get there. From 108th and Fort to Papillion, to Bellevue is 4 hours. An individual has to run 7 miles just to make sure he can get home by midnight. We can do better. And that's what this bill is about. We can do better. It's about growing Omaha and taking an economic stance, saying we understand as we move forward with economic development in and around Omaha, public transportation is the issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Those waiting in the queue, Senator Arch, Erdman, and Moorfield. Senator Arch, you're recognized.
If I could ask Senator Wayne some questions.
Senator Wayne, would you please yield?
Just a little bit of context, because of course Papillion La Vista is my district, and this has been frequently referenced here. There is a line that comes out of Omaha, runs on 84th Street, and it is contracted, as I understand it, to the Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. And I guess I just have, this has been a complicated bill, and we've had multiple discussions about this in urban affairs, and I felt it was worthwhile to bring it out to the floor for discussion, and I just want some things to clarify with Senator Wayne, if he'd be willing to respond to some questions.
Yes.
Thank you. So do you think that by going to a regional transit authority, that some of the issues that you talked about currently in Omaha right now could be solved by going to a regional transit authority, the infrequency of buses, that type of thing? Do we have a bigger problem than just this, or do you think this would help solve some of those problems?
This would help solve some of those problems. Not all, but it'd be a huge start.
Okay. If a city opts in to participate in this, is there a way to opt out?
Yes, and if I can go back through the bill and get you that exact section, and if it's not, I will make sure it's on there. I thought we have had many discussions about that, and if it's not, as you know, we went through variations of this bill in our committee. I will make sure it's in there.
Several variations of this bill in committee, yes. So a community could vote to withdraw. Supermajority puts them in. What would happen to the current Metropolitan Omaha Transit Authority?
So they have to vote to turn into a regional one, and then it would go away. The current one would go away.
So the current one becomes the regional. More representation is brought on to the board. Does it become an elected board right away?
So it becomes the regional up until the first election, and then it could potentially be a new board, all elected, unless they decide to run or rerun.
Okay. And the ability to impose the property tax, 5 cents up to 10 cents, would be the decision of that board?
Yes. It would be the decision of the newly established board.
Would they have the ability to have different levels of property taxes, one for Omaha, one for Papillion, one for La Vista? Would it be one? Would that be a possibility?
Unfortunately, no, due to the uniformity and proportionality clause in our Constitution. But that's one of the issues that was being raised, is that currently under statute, you would have an Omaha board who's appointed dictating, and a Douglas County, kind of conferment board dictating to Sarpy County what they are. So they need to be a representative from Sarpy County on the board.
From Sarpy County, okay.
Well, from that.
Or from the community that agrees to join, because
Correct.
each one would, so coming out of Omaha, you'd have Ralston, you'd have La Vista, you'd have Papillion. Each one of those would have separate decisions as to whether to participate?
Yes, each municipality has their own decision of whether to participate. So there could be a situation where Bellevue says yes and Papillion says yes and Ralston says no. I was trying to think of how the line works.
Right. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, I'm looking at my questions here.
1 minute.
Well, those are my questions for now. As I said, this has, and as Senator Wayne has mentioned, this has had several iterations, and it's not simple. I felt as though, of course, as the metropolitan area is identified, this is restricted to the Omaha MSA, but as that metropolitan Omaha develops, you mentioned coming out to jobs out in Papillion, La Vista. It can work the other way as well. So the transportation could be provided to go to jobs in Omaha and the downtown area as well. So I think it's worthy of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Arch and Senator Wayne. Senator Erdman, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator LaGrone would move to amend the committee amendments with AM 1552.
Senator LaGrone, you're welcome to open on AM 1552.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, at the end of my opening, I'll end up withdrawing this amendment. But Senator Hughes, in his discussion with Senator Wayne, had a lot of the discussion that I was curious about. Now, I was not thrilled with how those questions went because it confirmed my fears about this bill. Now, I think Senator Wayne is completely correct. We do need to fix transportation in the Omaha metro area. We do have a worker crisis of connecting workers to where the work is. But I don't think creating another taxing entity and another elected board is the way to do that. I think that is just growing government, where in this state we already have many, many more levels of government than most states have. And I think that's a big problem that we need to grapple with, and something that's driving our property tax problem. And this bill reminds me a lot of the learning community, where it primarily taxed Sarpy County residents to pay for services within Douglas County. And so the amendment that I have brought, what it would do is it would say, okay, if we're going to create this additional entity of government that is going to tax Sarpy County residents to pay for services in Douglas County, then we should at least eliminate another one first. So what the amendment would do is it is actually entirely Senator Erdman's bill that gets rid of the learning community. And I think that that really would at least lessen the burden of this bill if we ease this property tax burden on Sarpy County residents to pay for it, because this is a new tax. This is a 10-cent new tax on certain places in Sarpy County to pay for services primarily focused in Douglas County. While it does attempt to solve a metro-wide issue of worker transportation, that's something I'm more than willing to work with Senator Wayne on over the interim, because that is an issue that we do need to address. But creating another layer of government that is paid for much by Sarpy County residents to provide services mainly in Douglas County is not the answer. We have already rejected that with the learning community, where we finally got rid of the common levy. I supported Senator Erdman's bill that's still in education to get rid of the learning community entirely to finish off that issue. But this reminds me a lot of that, so that is why I brought the amendment, to show how this could go poorly. So with that, I wanted to raise that as a discussion point, because I think the parallels are stark, but I would withdraw that amendment this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator LaGrone. So ordered. Returning to floor discussion. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon. Senator LaGrone, I appreciate your comments about the learning community. As you have appropriately stated, the learning community basically is an organization looking for a mission. And that learning community has run amok, and they have now started a foundation. And on that foundation, you don't necessarily even need to be from the state of Nebraska. They're not elected. That foundation does not adhere to the open meetings law, does not have an agenda, and they have never said what they're going to do with the money that they receive. And one of the issues that I never understood is, why do they need a foundation? Because now you can contribute tax-exempt money to a school, and I'm not sure exactly why they did that, but they must have a reason. And that learning community is something that needs to absolutely, once and for all, be abolished. And this transit system that Senator Wayne is trying to put in place is going to collect about the same amount of money, maybe more. So I was wondering if Senator Wayne would yield a question.
Senator Wayne, would you please yield?
Yeah, yes, love to.
Senator Wayne, so how much money does 10 cents collect if they went to the max?
Oh, I don't have that information right now. Based off of my OPS experience, every cent raised about $2.3 million. That's just OPS, though. That wouldn't cover the entire city.
So their current mill levy is about 5.5 cents?
Their current ask is about 5.
So that would be on what's your valuation?
Right now their budget is $32 million.
32 million. So if we had 5 more cents, it'd be 64 million?
No, because I'm getting something over here.
Okay.
I'm sorry, their property tax revenue is only $18 million.
18, so it would double, go to 36.
Yeah, they do get some federal dollars. I forgot about that.
Okay. So how many people ride this bus system, this transit system now?
I don't know. I can get you that number. I'll get the exact membership. It's kind of the chicken and the egg. I'll just be honest.
Okay. In Section 8, that in your handout, you handed that out to describe what's in each section. In Section 8, you talk about the 7-member board that's going to be elected. And I read through the bill there to look at where they're going to be and how they're going to be elected. Who's going to make that decision where the districts are?
It would be like we do all our districting and redistricting. It'll be through the Douglas County Commission, or the commissioners, Sarpy and Douglas County, if there's 2 counties, and then it'll be approved by the board.
And there are going to be 7 members on that board?
Yes. The initial board is drawn by the election commission, then it changes, so yes.
And so will they all be elected on the same day, or you're going to stagger those, or how do you do that? Will they all be elected at the same time?
Section 8 staggers it.
Okay, I didn't see that. Thank you. So where will these buses go, these additional new buses? And I'm not familiar with Omaha, so try to help me understand. Are they going to go to the to the processing plant for the chicken people?
Actually, Fremont is outside of our MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area, but we are trying to figure out how to contract with them to provide buses for them.
How far is that?
From my district, it's 20 minutes.
So that would be a logical place for people to find work?
Correct, but it's outside of the Metropolitan Statistical Area, so it would have to be an individual contract.
Thank you. So would this bill allow them to join you?
This would not allow them to join us at this time because we defined it as a metropolitan statistical area. And I just want to mention, because you said something, unlike the learning community and everything else, you're not forced to be here. So it's not a forced upon anybody. It's the local government's option.
And you are correct about the learning community. You are forced to be there. That is a correct statement. So thank you for answering those questions. I'm still trying to figure this out. We don't have buses or transit system where we work. We usually just get in the car and go to work. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Wayne. Senator Moorfield, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of LB 492 and the underlying amendment, and I want to compliment Senator Wayne on looking to a comprehensive solution to increase public transportation within his community. Obviously, this would not impact the Lincoln community, but as somebody who represents a district that is probably the least mobile in terms of car ownership-wise in Lincoln, I know all too well what this means for many different people. We have a lot of folks that are coming to this country for the first time, do not have a driver's license, utilize public transportation, or tries to, quite frankly. We have a long ways to go in the city of Lincoln, in my opinion. And it's really tough for them to get around, even in a city that is much smaller than the metro area of Omaha. And it has a real impact on people being able to have oftentimes not just one job, but multiple jobs. And particularly in a competitive employment environment, the more jobs that people can work, unfortunately, I wish that we lived in a society where a person could have one job and have a living wage, but oftentimes it takes multiple jobs for some folks. But the more opportunities we have for people to get efficiently from one job to another, the better ability we have to be able to fulfill some of those workforce needs. In addition, we also have a lot of folks that come from other communities in greater Nebraska when, for whatever reason, they can't drive because of a disability or something else. And quite frankly, they come to the urban areas because they're unable to really provide for themselves in some of the rural communities that are much more spread out and do not have public transportation. And some of those individuals come here and they still struggle, even being in an urban community, being productive and being able to get from one place to another. So I guess, you know, if you're opposed to this bill, then I'm curious as to what your solution is that achieves the same end, the same goal as Senator Wayne. I'd be interested in hearing those alternative solutions because currently the status quo isn't working. My organization's worked in Omaha with a lot of communities before, and one of the big barriers to getting services or even voting in person has been hour, 2 hour, 3 hour long bus rides to get to places that would otherwise take 15 or 20 minutes. We had a transportation system that was adequate. So with that being said, I just wanted to rise in support of LB 492 and thank Senator Wayne for his efforts.
Thank you, Senator Moorfield. Senator Blood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow senators, friends all, for the few that are left in the chambers, and I wish there were more because this is such an important bill. I do stand up in support of both the Urban Affairs Amendment and the underlying bill of Senator Wayne's. And I've kind of been waiting. I didn't want to talk on this bill, but I think there's still some things that need to be said. In eastern Nebraska, we have a lot going on. There was a reason that MAPPA came and spoke in favor of this bill. So around 2015, I want to say, we got a lot of information about millennials. So as we all know, Nebraska has more jobs than we have qualified people. How do we bring millennials into eastern Nebraska to take these jobs that we can't fill? And one of the key things that we discovered was transportation was a key issue. They wanted to be able to do ride sharing. They wanted to be able to do bike sharing. They wanted to be able to walk and ride on safe paths to and from work and home and for their entertainment purposes. And the key issue when it comes to the bus system in eastern Nebraska is that it's a really expensive investment in our communities. Bellevue has limited bus service and we pay through the nose for it, but we have to have it. And the people that are getting punished because we don't have this good connectivity are, quite frankly, are lower income people who are looking to go outside our community to get better jobs, people with disabilities, and our seniors. And I think that that's unfair that it's not balanced correctly, and I think the only way we can do it is if we have a seat at the table, and that's what this bill is doing for Sarpy County. If we don't have a voice at the table, our voice is never heard. Now, he's already told you that we're really not changing the 5-cent, 10-cent thing. It already exists. He's saying they can have up to 10 cents, but right now they're doing it around 5 cents. He's not really creating a new level of government. He's basically making the existing level better, is how I look at it. I look at Senator Arch's district, PayPal. One of the first things I found when I was campaigning, and although I was not campaigning in his district, was PayPal complained to me about how they just could not get workers to La Vista, that the bus service was not coming to them, and that people were having to take jobs but not actually start jobs, quit jobs because it was just too much of a hassle to get to and from PayPal. And they had been problem solving. Do we chauffeur people? Do we have our own shuttle? But that's a big issue, and PayPal's a big employer in Nebraska. So Omaha does things like, it's called transit-oriented development, or TOD. And the goal is to generate more rides. And what you're hearing with Senator Wayne's bill, I'm assuming, is just part of this big push for us to have better connectivity. And you heard me talk about it when we talked about NRD trails. That's part of the big picture. You hear about it a lot with economic development. How do we connect North Omaha to South Omaha? How do we connect Bellevue to Omaha and La Vista to Omaha? Because Omaha is the hub in our area, folks. But more importantly, how do they come and work in our communities? How can we ever bring good business in to Sarpy County if we can't provide them with the bodies? Because the bottom line is, and I know what Senator Urban's talking about, where I grew up at, you got in your car and you drove. But that's not always the same in municipal areas. And so we need to make sure that we support this for the right reason. And the right reason is Eastern Nebraska has a plan. It's a very successful plan. We're going to keep the millennials, bring more millennials in. We're going to keep growing, and we have planned development, and this is part of our development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator LaGrone, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I agree with Senator Blood that we do have a workforce issue in Sarpy County, and actually PayPal's in my district in La Vista. Yeah, but you're absolutely correct that we do need more workers in that area. My problem isn't, I agree with Senator Wayne on the problem. I think this is not a good solution, and I'm willing to work with him to find another solution. But I think that creating a government entity and taxing the citizens of Sarpy County, primarily for services in Douglas County, is not the answer. It's effectively, as I showed with my previous amendment, the learning community of transit. And I think that's a really bad idea. And I think that if we took time over the interim to look at this issue, we could find a structure that would work for everyone without raising taxes on Sarpy County citizens, without creating a new entity of government, which we already have way too many of in this state, to solve the same problem without putting all of these burdens on the taxpayers. So that's my issue with the bill. That's why I won't be supporting it, though I do recognize this is an issue that needs to be solved. With that, I'd yield the remainder of my time to Senator Arch.
Senator Arch, 330.
Thank you, Senator LeGrone. One of the things that actually you raised, Senator LeGrone, which has again started my thinking in a particular area, is if the Regional Metropolitan Area Transit Authority Board decides that the greatest need is actually not in those communities where who have just joined this Regional Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, if they determine that the greatest need is actually in another area, I guess the concern would be, is there a way for those dollars then to shift out of that community, not actually serve that community? So that being said, I know that Senator Wayne is more than willing to continue the discussion on this bill and wants to make it as good as possible and make sure that there's no all these questions are answered along the way. And I would welcome continuing that discussion with him. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator LeGrone and Senator Arch. Senator Lowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. You know, as I look around the floor here, it looks better now. But as I looked around when I hit my light, there was only a few people here. And this is an important bill. I didn't want people rushing in and not knowing what was happening. I commend Senator Wayne for bringing the bill. I voted it out of committee. Not agreeing totally with it. I kind of voted it out because I think we need to discuss this here on the floor and maybe make it a better bill. And I think Senator Wayne is willing to do that because he came from one point and brought these two amendments so that he could make it a better bill. So let's take some time and let's come up with a great bill to help the people of his district, to help Omaha. I don't want to see a whole lot of buses running around that are empty, so let's come up with a good plan. I don't want to see a lot of vacant places where people have to run 2 miles to catch the next bus. I also don't want to create a new taxing authority or make a taxing authority larger because every time we do that, they seem to spend more money and not be conservative. So let's take a little time. Let's wait for people to come back and so they know what we're actually voting on. And let's make this a better bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Hunt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just kind of gathering some of my notes about this. I'm in the Urban Affairs Committee, and this is one of the bills that came before me this year that it was one of those that I wish that I thought of. And I admire Senator Wayne so much for caring so proactively and so thoughtfully about the community he represents. And I represent a district where this is a big problem too. The problems that Senator Wayne was talking about with access to transportation to jobs. When we're creating jobs in Nebraska, but we don't have a way to get people to those jobs, what we're really doing is just creating more places for people with middle class, upper class people to go work. And when lower income people or people in poverty can't access those jobs, we're not actually helping people in our state, and certainly not in my district where this stuff is needed. When this article came out in the World Herald, written by Matthew Hansen about the man Don Ferry who gave up the cars for Lent, I really related to that because when I was married, my husband and I shared one car, and frequently we had to use public transportation to get around, and it was really difficult. When I was elected, and I've gotten a couple emails in the last few weeks, I feel like they come in once in a while, accusing me of having a gay agenda or trying to push progressive agenda on the legislature and in Nebraska. But my biggest agenda as a legislator is to get Nebraska to population 2 million. We're so close, and we've been so close for such a long time, and it's no secret that we're battling brain drain in our state. And young talent is often looking elsewhere to relocate. When I was growing up, I heard it all the time from my peers, like, I can't wait to get out of here. And now that I'm an adult, I hear people all the time saying, I had no idea that Nebraska was so cool. People who move here from out of state and they get a job here. And these, of course, are people with cars, and these are people who can get to their jobs. We know from millennials that a lot of us would really like to not have a car. A lot of us would like to live in a community where we can get around by bus or we can get around by train. And if we don't do something in our state to provide the infrastructure for that to happen, we're never going to get there. So what my understanding of this bill is, from being on the committee and for talking about this with Senator Wayne, is that passing a bill like this, which is definitely not in its final form, I think that we need to move it through general file and continue to work very proactively and very thoughtfully, because if our legislature can pass a bill like this, it's going to change the next 15 years in our state and the next 20 years in our state for the way that we're able to attract and retain talent going forward. Passing this bill isn't going to fix it immediately. It's just going to give the skeleton to municipalities and to regional areas to be able to find a solution for this in the future. This is not a new level of government. It just increases local control so that areas like where I live can have more control over their local government and be able to build something locally that actually serves the people that need this type of service. So I have a question for Senator Wayne, if he would yield.
Senator Wayne, would you please yield?
Yes.
Am I correct in understanding that under this bill, Lincoln could create a regional metropolitan transit authority if they wanted to within their statistical area?
Under the amendment?
Yeah, is it the amendment or?
The amendment, no.
Okay, then never mind about that. But in any case, thank you. I support this bill, and I think that it's important for us to have a structure that we can start talking about solutions for public transportation, and not only have a conversation about that, but we have something here that's in the works and that's being produced and that's going to give us some actual solutions. So with that, I'd urge your green vote, and I'm very excited to potentially be a part of a group that's able to make this happen in Nebraska. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Hunt and Senator Wayne. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, enrollment and reviewed reports Legislative Bill 470 to select file with enrollment and review amendments. Following bills reported correctly engrossed: 138, 177, 227, 237, 237A, 496, 616, 641A, 693. Senator Kavanaugh, an amendment to 397 to be printed. Senator Lathrop to 538. Mr. President, Senator Bostelman would move to adjourn the body until Wednesday morning, May 1st at 9 o'clock a.m.
Colleagues, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you.